Welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. This is the Beverly School Committee regular school committee meeting. We are meeting in a hybrid model tonight using a remote meeting platform that is provided at no cost to our district. Additionally, our friends at BevCam are broadcasting us tonight. This allows for public access to the open portions of the meeting. This is allowed under the Governor's March 12, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. This order is now almost 1 year old. This order specifically suspends the need for the quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks for our body to use technical methods to allow for safe public access. We encourage everyone to use the BevCam streaming options this evening if possible. Additionally, we are trying a captioning tool while a longer-term, better solution is created citywide. As I stated, tonight is a regular school committee meeting. Let me just admit some more participants. This is a regular school committee meeting, which means we have an agenda item for addressing the body during the meeting. A number of people have signed up in advance and or sent written statements for the chair to read. If you have an interest in addressing the body tonight, you may send your request to citizenconcerns@beverlyschools.org. That's citizen concerns, plural concerns, @beverlyschools.org. I will need to check my iPhone at the appropriate time to see if there's any additional speakers this evening. And I'd just like to encourage all of the members to remember that the use of phones, iPads, and computers during this meeting does open any request for open records. So do keep that in mind. Generally, we do not like the use of technology, but with the remote meeting platform, I often, as chair, need to make sure I am letting participants in, such as this person who is trying to join now. But I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware of that open meeting rule. Okay, so at 7:10 approximately, we'll be reaching that portion of our agenda. I have a number of speakers who will speak approximately 3 minutes, and then I will check to see if we have any additional members of the public that wish to address us. Joining us tonight in person are the school committee members, as well as various members of the district administration and leadership teams. We also have a number of members of our district administrators and leadership team joining us on the platform. I will perform a full roll call in a moment because the meeting application sometimes does not show all of those participants. I want to remind everyone that any audio or video that you do supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record. As such, I please request that you keep yourself on mute until the chair has called for you to speak. Now, members, I'm going to take a roll call of all those present, and then we will look to the platform to see who else is joining us. I am Rachel Abel. I am joined to my right by Ms. Lorinda Visnick and Dr. Ken-Ann McKenzie. To my left, I am joined by Kimberly Coelho, Mr. John Mulady, and Ms. Karen Robinson. Also joining us in person this evening, Dr. Sue Chirocek, Dr. Dorothy Flaherty, Ms. Bethany Splansky, she's on this list over here, and Dr. Andre Morgan. We also have CO Smith in attendance this evening, and Ms. Principal Lisa Oliver. Those are our in-person guests. Joining us tonight, we have Ms. Betty Taylor, principal of the Beverly High School, Ms. Christina Leo, the director of food services. We have Dana Cruikshank, the director of transportation, Ms. Erin Brown, the principal at North Beverly, Ms. Erin Sweeney, our principal at Cove, Ms. Gabrielle Montevecchi, principal at Hannah, Mr. Gregory Twombly, who is a principal here at the middle school. iPhone guest, I would ask that you put your real name, please, or I will have to remove you from the meeting. Okay. We also have Ms. Jamie Norton, another principal at the middle school, Ms. Julia Brotherton, a teacher and BTA president, Ms. Julie Smith, principal at Centerville, is a test for me. We have Kate Twombly, principal at the middle school. We have a guest speaker, Dr. Kirsten. Another speaker, Kim Kirsten, Larissa Mills. We have Principal Megan Hart. We have paraprofessional Paul Drake. We also have speaker VJ Aquino. We have our student representative, Jaslyn Abbott. And the other members are participating both in person and on the remote platform. Okay, and I am getting buzzed. Okay, I think we are ready to begin. Since we are all in person this evening, we will not need to do roll call votes unless Mayor Cahill decides to join us remotely. I suspect he'll be right on his way. And with that, our first order of business this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would like to ask Dr. Morgan this evening if you could give us a lead in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Typically at our regular meetings, we do have recognition of students, employees, and community members. We will enjoy that time next month. We didn't want to beat the Salem News out with some of their all-stars, and we'll look forward to that at our next meeting in April. So our next order of business is the approval of our meeting records from our regular school committee meeting on February 10th, 2021. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Thank you, Mr. Milady. Were there any comments or corrections on the meeting records that as they were presented? I'm not seeing any hands, so I will go ahead and call for those in favor of approving the records as presented. And those opposed? That passes 6-0. Okay. And now it is approximately 7:10 p.m. As I mentioned, we have a number of speakers who have signed up in advance. I will be checking my email for the citizens' concerns at beverlyschools.org for any additional speakers. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Kim Kirsten. You have the floor. You may unmute.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to make a statement. My name is Kim Kirsten, and I am an internal medicine physician. I work for Beth Israel Leahy up at Anna Jakes, and I treat both adolescent and the adult population. I'm also a mom of 3. 1 graduated last year from Beverly High, class of 2020, and 2 are currently enrolled freshman and junior. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who's had to work through this pandemic. These are trying times and especially taxing for those that have to make decisions for an entire community when there are often no clear answers. I also do want to thank teachers. I have witnessed their enthusiasm and passion while having to teach to a cameras turned off black classroom. That is not easy. But my main message tonight is to tell you all how imperative it is to get the kids back to in-person learning as soon as possible. It was heartening to hear the announcement last week of the additional day that underclassmen will be getting coming at the end of March, but we need a full return to the classroom immediately. I am overwhelmed in my practice seeing the effects COVID has had on my young adults and adolescent population, also older adults. I'm seeing undetected abuse. People feel lonely, they're isolated, they're secluded. The rise in depression and anxiety amongst my patients is, I can't even imagine that it would ever get this bad. These symptoms do not go away just in a few days. Adults and children need socialization. I can unequivocally say that from the adolescents I treat at work, from what I have seen in my own family, and from what numerous other Beverly families are telling me, our kids are hurting. Despite the outstanding effort made by teachers and administrators, I think we can all agree that our children's current education and their academic engagement is lacking. They learn better in school. I'm seeing it firsthand. They are not absorbing, and some of them are no longer trying. Thank you for thoughtfully creating the hybrid approach to learning and juggling all the cohorts. There was a time that was needed, but not anymore. Full in-person learning can happen now. Washing hands, wearing our masks, and socially distancing, and sometimes it's not always 6 feet, has kept my practice, my patients, and my office staff safe. We can achieve these for schools too. The CDC agrees. They say vaccinations are not a prerequisite for any of us to work, and it is not a prerequisite for our kids to return to school. So I just like to close with a quote from a medical colleague. The pandemic has harmed children, not because they have fallen ill from the virus, but by the choices society has made to protect adults. Kids have already lost a year of school, development, and life. We must not keep the lives of children on hold, waiting for the perfect scenario that might never come. So I appreciate this time, and I appreciate all your communications to the community. Thank you for listening, and please get our children back into in-person learning at school. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirsten. Next, VJ Aquino, if you would please unmute. Thank you.
Hi, my name is BJ Aquino, and I'm a parent of a Beverly High School sophomore. First, I'd also like to commend the school committee for further opening Beverly High School. I appreciate the time some of you spent listening to me personally, and the time you spent with other parents who share my concerns. I know this is very challenging for everyone, and you all have difficult jobs to do, so please know that we all appreciate it. The committee is following the available science and the will of the parents, 80% of whom wanted to send their children back to school in person per the survey that we reviewed at the last meeting. I also found it encouraging from the survey that even though at the time the vaccine was not available to teachers as a group, approximately 50% of teachers were also ready to return. I'm certain that number has gone up as the overriding concern we heard from Ms. Brotherton and from the media was teacher vaccinations. So I'm very glad that teachers are now sort of a priority group. So at this point, now that they are, as well as a surge in available vaccine that's predicted in the Wall Street Journal and other news outlets, and we're seeing some states like Alaska actually make vaccines available to all of the residents, it's clear that we are moving very quickly towards an environment where the already low risk that Dr. Kirsten was talking about of in-school transmissions drops to something that is very negligible. In fact, current studies say we were already there with masks and 3 to 6 foot social distancing, both of which we already had in place. With all that said, my ask of the committee is to start to prepare for fully reopening all of Beverly's schools as other local communities like Danvers and Peabody are working on. There's no scientific reason we should not be preparing to do so. We also know from many studies, which I've shared with this committee and from our local pediatricians, that the emotional and mental toll on our students is real and getting worse. We cannot ignore that or think we can fix that down the road very quickly. Additionally, we saw our own teachers respond to the survey that approximately, I think it was 80% thought that the current learning model was somewhat ineffective. If we further delay a full reopening, we need to be very crisp as to what that reason is. What basis does it have after reviewing the scientific evidence available, the survey results, the superintendent reviewed at the last meeting, and the mental health crisis we're currently in? The reason shouldn't be the unknown or fear of what might be. I don't personally think that's a valid reason to prevent our children from their right to an effective education, the benefits of in-person learning, or to, the continued harm that they're facing by not returning to school. Thanks again for the actions you've taken so far and your interest in getting our students back to where they belong in school with their teachers and peers. We really appreciate the work you're putting in, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aquino. Next up, we have Ms. Larissa Mills. If you'd like to unmute, you can address the body.
Hi, I'm actually going to keep it really brief because I feel that the previous two speakers said really and very eloquently everything I've been wanting to say and have been saying for this past year. I could rattle on, even we could all kind of go through a lot of statistics about percentages and probabilities of things, but I think everybody is, I hope, pretty aware of that. I think what I would just add is that in the beginning of the year, my daughter and a few other kids stood outside of the school building with some signs. There were 3 of them. And the signs that they held up were that school is essential and that teachers are essential. And I think there were a lot of, it's interesting, there were a lot of students at the time that drove by and yelled at them and said a lot of pretty horrible things to them. That it was selfish or they didn't care. I think the main point in this is that education is essential to the kids and their teachers are that essential to them. It's that important to them. That's how much they feel and care about their teachers and their education. These are kids wanting to go back into school. I think that, you know, that's sort of a dream that we want them to be in school and that they do value their teachers that much. So I think really that's just all that I'm probably want to add is that our education, our kids' education and the teachers are valued. It is because we value them that much that we want our kids to be there and that the kids themselves want to be in school. So that's really all I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mills. Next, BTA President and Teacher Julia Brotherton would like to address the body. Ms. Brotherton, you can unmute.
Good evening. Thanks for listening tonight. I just have one main point to make tonight. And I do appreciate hearing the voices of all of the parents out there. And again, want to repeat that we all want to be back in person teaching as soon as possible also. But my one main point is that this evening, Superintendent Chirocek is, I believe, planning to propose that Beverly Middle School move to an all-in model starting April 5th. This would include having students eat lunch in the building, a scenario about which many middle school educators expressed extreme concern when responding to last week's staff survey. Since the commissioner is not requiring a move to all-in for middle schools until April 28th, I'm requesting on behalf of the members of the Beverly Teachers Association that you push off the move to an all-in model for the middle school until that date, April 28th. Give our members more time to be fully vaccinated. It's my understanding that the Department of Education would grant a waiver to Beverly for its 5th grade to start at that later date. Many middle school educators will not be fully vaccinated by April 5th. Some won't even have received their first shot. Right now, we're each on our own when it comes to snagging an appointment, and this has not been easy. We might hear something different about this tonight, but as far as I know right now, it's kind of like the Hunger Games out there. You kind of sit there clicking on your CBS button, and some of us get lucky and some of us do not. So I'm just asking you to wait a little longer so that more of us can get vaccinated, do the right thing by Beverly Middle School's educators, and delay a full reopening until just a slightly later date. We all want to return to in-person learning. We're just asking you to push that moment off a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brotherton. A couple of our constituents have sent letters that they have asked the chair to read into the record so that the body can appreciate their sentiments. I had received a couple of other emails without confirmation if they wanted them read or if they would be appearing. If they don't appear shortly on our platform, I did send them the invite. I can read those as well. The first is from Dr. Ian Sclaver. He is a pediatrician here in Beverly. This is a letter dated March 10th, 2021, addressed to Mayor Cahill, Ms. Abel, and members of the school committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts tonight. I want to strongly advocate that the Beverly Public Schools resume full-time in-person school as soon as possible, because so many children and adolescents are negatively impacted by the ongoing isolation of remote school days. I would say first that I am very grateful and very impressed with all that our teachers have done to educate and support our students over this very difficult year, and I would never suggest a plan that would put teachers or students in harm's way. As I see it, as members of the school committee, you are essentially being tasked with balancing risk. On the one hand is the risk of spreading COVID in the schools, and on the other hand is the risk of deteriorating mental health for our children and adolescents who are suffering from the cumulative effects of isolation over the past year. In terms of spreading COVID, there are several good studies that have been published. For example, from North Carolina and Wisconsin, which demonstrate almost no spread of COVID in schools despite high rates in the surrounding communities. And we have lots of local data from contact tracing which demonstrates the same. That is to say that with the universal mask wearing, COVID essentially is not spread in schools. One of the contentious issues is whether students and staff need to be 6 feet apart, which effectively makes it impossible to bring all children back to an in-person school. But the 6-foot spacing was based on how far respiratory droplets spread when you are not wearing a mask. Good data shows that wearing a mask prevents the vast majority of that spread, and a large number of infectious disease experts have agreed that 6 feet is no better than 3 feet when masks are worn. Importantly, 3-foot distancing would allow most schools to have the space for students to return in person. On the other side of the balance is the mental health epidemic. We are seeing a tremendous increase in depression, anxiety, and suicidality in our adolescents. I am seeing multiple patients each day for these concerns, particularly middle school and high school students. I have been a pediatrician in Beverly for over 25 years, and I have never seen so many patients with mental health concerns. Kids who did not have issues pre-pandemic are now struggling, and those who had previous issues are doing worse. There are few supports available and essentially no appointments available with therapists. A shocking number of teenagers have been prescribed antidepressant medications. They are on wait lists for psychiatric programs, and kids are boarding in emergency rooms because they cannot get a bed in a psychiatric facility. Local and national data have suggested that there has been a 40% increase in visits for mental health concerns. These numbers appear to be increasing as the effect of isolation is cumulative. Each day that a student is excluded from school adds to the likelihood that they will be experiencing depression and anxiety. So while the small theoretical risk of being infected with COVID in schools has largely been shown not to occur, there are real and rapidly increasing mental health concerns if kids do not return to school in person. I sincerely hope we can prioritize the essential service of kids getting back to in-person school ahead of opening bars, gyms, and in-person dining. We adults in the community should be willing to forego those amenities to keep our community safe and keep our kids healthy. I hope that you will provide the opportunity for all kids to return to full-time, in-person school very soon. Their lives may literally depend on it. Thank you. Ian Sclaver, MD. The next letter I have, it's an email entitled Return to Middle School, comes from Mark Harrison. He is a teacher at Beverly Middle School, and he asked that I read this to the body. Good afternoon. I am a grade 6 humanities teacher at Beverly Middle School who, along with my colleagues and students, have worked tirelessly to make the best out of a difficult situation. However, after attending a voluntary staff meeting yesterday at Beverly Middle School regarding the transition to full in-person learning, I was left with one burning question. Since Commissioner Riley has mandated the full return to in-person learning set for April 28th at the latest, why are we, as a district, rushing to begin this on March 22nd or March 29th? It was clear to me and many of my colleagues our proposed schedule left too many questions unanswered as of yesterday afternoon. I am and continue to be in support of the move to return to full in-person learning, but I cannot and have not heard evidence that supports such a quick transition. The only reason I heard from our administrators was, quote unquote, Danvers voted to go back the 29th. I would like the school committee to explain the rush, especially given Commissioner Riley has given middle school students until April 28th to create and execute a schedule with all the precautionary measures. In addition, I realize the parents have been surveyed. Although we never were presented the data in a formal meeting, our most important stakeholders, our students, have never been asked how they feel. I know some of my students are in favor, but some of them are very anxious about a full return to school. Why have they not been surveyed? Is there a plan to address their social and emotional needs with the transition? To quote Benjamin Franklin, quote, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail," end quote. It is my belief that we, as a middle school, are not ready and will not be ready if the school committee votes to begin the transition by March 22nd or March 29th. I hope that we can work together as a community to do what is best for everyone. And then it says, I'm willing to speak tonight, but I'm also looking to have the bolded questions posed to the committee prior to the presentation of the middle school plan. Thank you for your time and consideration, Mark Harrison, Beverly Middle School. Let me just check the Citizen Concerns email account to see if we have any others that have requested to speak. Thank you for that clarification from one person who does not want their email read. I did not hear from these people. They did send the emails to the citizens concerned. I will read them. They're both very brief. One is another, actually, I'm only going to read the one that actually identifies the author. The other one says it is another staff member, so I will not allow that to be read into the open record. This one is from Christoph Marr, grade 7 science teacher, Beverly Middle School. Dear Beverly School Committee members, I want to take time to express my concern regarding what I see as a rush to return students to the classroom full-time. As a classroom teacher, I recognize the importance of having students in school and how difficult this year has been for the students, both in terms of emotion and lost learning. I also recognize how difficult it has been for the families and how important it is for them to return to more normalcy. However, I feel that the staff members of the Beverly Public School and their families are not being considered with equal regard. I have myself been unable to schedule an appointment for a vaccine. I am willing to return if vaccinated, but not without one. I am concerned about contracting the virus given the crowded space of a full classroom. I am also concerned for those that I live with and potentially passing it on to them. I understand the reasons for wanting to return students to the classroom, but I am disappointed to say the least that the push was not made to vaccinate the staff before the idea of returning students full-time. I hope this will be given more consideration tonight and that the staff will be prioritized to be vaccinated before students return in full. Sincerely, Christopher Marr, grade 7 science. Okay, I think that completes our public address of the body. I have received no further emails. I'm looking online and I don't believe we have any other speakers that have appeared. Okay. Thank you to all of the constituents, parents, and teachers who've chimed in. Our next order of business, I believe, we have some items by consensus. So this is number 6 on our agenda. There is a list of warrants labeled A, B, C, and D for various amounts as listed in the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Generally, we don't have questions on this, so all in favor? That's 7-0. Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Abbott, thank you for patiently standing by. I hope that your Wi-Fi connection has improved so that you can give us your student report.
Thank you so much. Yes, it has. So to start off, on February 1st, third quarter began and report cards were given on February 5th. February 9th, there was a junior parent college planning from 5 to 6 p.m. and an open house for second semester from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., as well as the Beverly High School yearbook deadline for ads. So it's your last chance to commemorate your students' achievements in the yearbook. February 10th was the registration for Fall 2 athletics for football, cheer, and boys and girls track. You can locate the user fee online at the BHS website. And more information can be found in that page as well. February 23rd, there's the new BHS website, which looks amazing and is very organized. March 1st was the BHS Virtual Art Gallery and can be accessed through the BHS website. March 2nd is the first World of Difference meeting held, and it's to promote cultural diversity at BHS, and it combats hate as well as confronting discrimination. On March 3rd, the BHS Read Across America Day, and March 8th is the International Women's Day, honored by Model UN on the BHS page as well. March 8th through March 15th, the class of 2024 Beverly Bootstraps Food Drive is held, and March 10th, course selections for the upcoming year were held, so that's today. Some upcoming events. This Friday, there will be no school for Staff Development Day. March 22nd, the new schedule for seniors in person every day, and March 29th, the 2/3 cohort schedule will be in place. Other announcements, the BHS is offering 2 after-school enrichment programs that are free of charge and focus in math and science. And more information can be found on the BHS page. That is all.
Thank you, Jaslyn. We really appreciate it. As always, you're welcome to stick around for the meeting, but if you have homework, we completely understand if you need to drop off or just listen. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay, the next few items are from the chair. The first is a resolution draft that Ms. Visnick has presented us this evening to consider. It's a resolution in support of suspending MCAS testing. Ms. Visnick, did you wish to say any words?
This one's really short, so maybe we want to read it.
Sure, I can read it.
I would
Okay.
appreciate it.
So this is a draft for discussion purposes this evening. A resolution of Beverly Public School Committee in support of suspending MCAS testing. Whereas on November 7, 2020, the MASC delegates overwhelmingly voted to pass the MCAS and high-stakes testing resolution by a vote 112 to 9 to 2. Whereas, despite all best efforts, time on learning has been reduced due to remote and hybrid learning models, and therefore no additional time should be diverted from time on learning. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Beverly School Committee, 1, rejects the calls for the students of 2022 who missed their 10th grade MCAS testing to be required to make it up in the 2020-21 school year or ever. We demand that those students be held harmless for not taking the MCAS and that their graduation requirements will be determined by locally controlled voices of the school committee and the school administration within the remaining graduation requirements of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 2, reiterates our call for a moratorium on all high-stakes testing for the 2021 school year so that all students can benefit from their time being focused on direct instruction, and we urge the legislature to enact a moratorium on high-stakes testing for 3 years. And 3, directs the district to inform Governor Charlie Baker, Education Secretary Jeffrey Riley, and our state legislative delegation of our position in favor of canceling MCAS tests this year. So this is before the body. We could have a motion to adopt, a motion to table, a motion to amend it. Mr. Malady.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution as is.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Malady and Ms. Robinson. This is the portion where we can have discussion. Dr. McKenzie.
So I just have a couple of questions since this came up a few months ago. Can you clarify for us, Dr. Trocheck, what version of MCAS was proposed for this year? Because my understanding is that it was not going to be the typical schedule or length.
I'm going to invite
Anybody
Dr.
have that
Flaherty because she's
information?
our assessment expert, but I believe that there are two versions. There's the legacy and the next gen. And I'm not sure whether the legacy or the next gen were proposed for high school you're talking. We're all at the next gen for 3 through 8, so. Mike?
Mrs. Taylor's listening in too, but I believe the high school is legacy for this year. And it would be for sophomores and juniors that didn't take it last year. And there will be an option for the science test, which we already gave. It will be given again in the spring for the semester versions. And for the 3 through 8, it's a shortened test. It will only be one test per subject instead of
And it is the
two.
next gen. So I think the difference that Dr. McKenzie's referring to is that the legacy test is based on older standards, the next gen test is based on the updated standards, and they were sort of scaffolding the assessment on the standards in. And so I think what you were wondering, are they going to try to switch to the new standards for students that may have been, I think that's where I thought you were going with that. But I do believe that they had it aligned with whatever they were supposed to have taken. So if
It's
they
gonna
were
be,
scheduled to
right.
take legacy, it is legacy. If they were scheduled to take next gen, it is next gen.
It's
If
the
I'm addressing
transition
what I think you were
period.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that addresses it for me because I think the version of the test could impact whether or not people are supportive of it. I think a follow-up to that for me is whether there is an opportunity to consider the shorter, more diagnostic testing versus your traditional evaluative testing.
So, and
We're
Dr.
still
Flaherty can
waiting
correct me.
for guidance to come out. We're still anticipating more guidance from DESE on the high school MCAS.
Right, I do know the 3 through 8 has been a shortened version, but I don't believe it has been shifted to be diagnostic. It's still probably pretty much a baseline assessment of mastery of standards, if I were to guess.
The assumption is that it will be used more to let us know where learning gaps exist. The accountability isn't supposed to be held to us this year. So from a district standpoint, it can be assumed to be more diagnostic. We haven't gotten the exact final outcome of how that will look, but that also came out from the federal government that they would not grant the waiver for this year, but they are using it to look more at where students are for learning loss than for an accountability standard.
Okay, that was my understanding too. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Ms. Bisnick's hand first, and then Mayor Cahill.
Dr. Trocek, can you please speak to what kind of testing we are doing internally that we almost always do to measure our own kind of progress and our own how we allocate our differentiated learning within our classrooms? And specifically, can you address that relative to whether we need the MCAS to tell us where we are?
Right. So in Beverly, we do have a comprehensive suite of assessments that we do use K through 11, K through grades 11. We, in our early grades, we use diagnostic reading assessments as well as some benchmark assessments. So we use the DIBELS. We use, currently, we're still using the
Empowering writers for,
but that's a writing document. And then grades 3 through 11, we use the Linked assessments, which are aligned to the benchmarks and are digitally administered. So we absolutely have plenty of data that we collect locally in Beverly. In terms of that, the MCAS is always a measure, another measure that we use and we can look at, but I will tell you that I'm pretty confident that we have a plethora of data that we can look at in terms of, for the purposes that you said, whether or not it's to look at how we're differentiating within classrooms or some of those. If you've been at this curriculum instruction and seen the data meetings that we conduct, we have pretty extensive looks and a really nice read on where every child is in terms of mastery.
do you want to tell them about the district meetings we just had?
That's what I was referring to.
Mayor Cahill, and then Dr. McKenzie.
Thanks, Madam President. Dr. Trocek, this first resolved, I want to ask, this year's seniors, if they did not pass MCAS their sophomore year and it was not given their junior year, what is the current planning at the state, at DESE for them?
So
Are
there
they
was-
meant to
there
take
was-
it this year and pass it?
There have been a lot of things put together in order to make sure that students are not graduating due to the inability to take an MCAS test, either alternative opportunities for them to utilize grades and current caseload coursework that they had. You sort of customize and take a look at what they've done. We did not have a large number. Bethany actually has been working on that. Do you want to speak to that just a little bit?
But could I also ask, if I remember right, there was a point along the way late last school year where the state said to last year's seniors, if you haven't passed it, you're going to graduate. But are they, what are they saying about this year's seniors?
You can show it through coursework.
Yeah, so
and grades.
there are alternate methods for determining competency. So they've had different rollouts where we have to show that students have met coursework requirements that align with those standards. And then once they meet that competency determination, they can be issued a diploma without taking MCAS. So there's been multiple rollouts for multiple grade levels and in multiple areas to make sure that all students are captured in that data.
Okay, thank you. And so, just trying to read this resolve is saying that this year's juniors, if this is passed, it's us saying we don't want this year's juniors to be required to take the 10th grade MCAS this year or next year. Just trying to read the plain language. Is that, yeah, okay. Okay. So right now, DESE is calling for MCAS, the 10th grade MCAS to happen on what dates? And
It's
bit later?
throughout the spring, yeah.
so
This is in May up until June.
okay. So DESE believes that MCAS should still be happening for the 10th grade MCAS for this year. And this suggests that we would take a stand that we don't want this year's juniors to have to take it this year or next year. Okay. And then could I ask Ms. Visnick, I guess because I believe you're the author, right? On the second resolve, what is the rationale that we want a 3-year moratorium on the, I guess it would be the 10th grade MCAS because you refer to it as the high stakes test?
So the rationale is that our 10th graders from last year didn't take it, right? So this year's 11th graders, that's why I'm saying this year's 11th graders shouldn't have to take it again. They've missed a decent amount of what may well be on that test, or we cannot be assured that, despite our educators' best efforts, the time on learning is less. And so holding them to the same standard that others have been held to is a whole set of problems, right? And I don't wish to go to the spot of, am I for or against high stakes testing? I'll just set that whole conversation somewhere else and just look at the fact that we're in the middle of a global pandemic and they didn't take it last year's 10th graders. And there are certain subjects that if you didn't finish your class last year because we went through how many weeks of we're just going to hold steady before then we went back to, Beverly returns to learning or whatever we called it.
Keeps learning. Beverly keeps learning.
Beverly keeps learning. Sorry. And now even this year, you heard a whole bunch of parents speak about, my child isn't getting what they need to get. And we saw that on the survey results. So all of those things put together, how do we turn around and tell a group of children, you now have to take this high stakes test. And oh, by the way, you need to pass it to be able to graduate, when on some level you could assert that we as a school district have not given them the tools they need to take that test. We haven't given them all the learning that they need to cover all the material. And so they should be held harmless. And the 3-year moratorium is basically because last year, those 10th graders, right, to that year, which is last year's seniors as well, right? This year's seniors, and basically the whole group of children who are living through the pandemic in their high school years should be able to move out without having that as a graduation requirement. They should be able to prove their graduate capabilities some other way. And to some extent, I misled you. I'm not necessarily the author of this. This is a very standard resolution, fairly standard. We made a couple edits to it that came off of that's what was voted on at the MASC conference.
Okay, thanks. So the language, when you refer to 3 years, you're referring to last year, this year, and next year. In a sense, because when it says,
The current 10s too, right? So the current 10th graders
right,
are supposed to take a test
right.
this year. And again, I would assert to you that they're maybe not prepared to take that test, and they shouldn't have to take that test. And so they need to be able to get out, right? So that would be this year, 10, next year, 11, the next year, 12. 3 years.
Okay. So by voting for this, we are making a statement that we don't want the MCAS to be a requirement of graduation for this year's seniors, juniors, and sophomores. Okay.
So
Okay, we'll let Dr. Churchick respond, and then Dr. McKenzie.
So I guess I just wanted to just add one other point. Mrs. Taylor's chiming in with us a little bit. That one other, you're talking about it being mandated, but one opportunity that comes from MCAS is the Abigail Adams Scholarship. So just to clarify that if it wasn't administered and students weren't eligible, they wouldn't be eligible for that scholarship, which is a scholarship for tuition at the state colleges in Massachusetts. So I just want to have that on your radar. I'm not saying one way or the other, but Mrs. Taylor wanted to make sure that I shared that with you.
Okay. Dr. McKenzie, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess I'm still feeling at this point that some of the aspects of the resolution may already be getting addressed by the guidance. And so I'm feeling like we perhaps need to just maybe do a juxtaposition of where those two things are. I'm not hearing that there is a graduation requirement, at least not right now. And I'm not hearing that
I believe it was for this year's seniors.
for this year.
Right.
This year's seniors, sophomores,
Right.
and juniors do need to pass
Sophomores
it.
and juniors,
Yes.
freshmen, sophomore, and juniors, as of right now, are still expected that there's going to be one.
Yes, I think my point is that some of the language addresses things that are addressed at least for this class. And that the accountability measures are not exactly the same again for at least this year. And I think there is concern about the length of the test and those types of things that have been addressed by some of the shorter, sort of relatively speaking, shorter tests to get at some of the diagnostic tools. So with that being the case, one of the questions I had is, with the diagnostic measurements that currently are being used, is it the same disaggregated data that we are accustomed to have? And if that is the case, again, can we then use that to assess what needs to happen in terms of achievement and opportunity gaps?
So in our district measures that we use, the local measures, yes, we have the same ability. As a matter of fact, what we typically do is create a crosswalk between MCAS and our district data to use it as a predictive measure for success on MCAS. So it does align in that way. It aligns by the standards as well. So the local data that we do collect does have that availability. I also wanted to just correct one thing. We double checked. It is Next Gen that is being offered. They were scheduled to take the Next Gen when it was canceled last year. So they kept with the same mode that they were going to be taking. So it is the Next Gen test.
Okay, thank you.
I see Ms. Coelho.
Thank you, Madam President. So if we did adopt this, so the children wouldn't be held accountable to take the test in order to graduate, I know the scholarship is important to some of the children. Maybe those that want to take it could have the opportunity to express that, hey, I do want to take this, and then those that don't want to, don't have to. That way they can still try to qualify for that scholarship.
So I guess one clarification, it's a resolution that you're saying it's the opinion of the body that we would wish this not to happen, but it's not a local decision as such, so we can't actually decide not to do it, but we can state that we're in support of a decision that would not have them have to do it. So just to kind of clarify. So, but yes, I mean, one option would be to make it, if in fact that was, and I don't know whether the state would make it option, so I don't know whether the state would then look for a different measure for Abigail Adams, if in fact the state decided not to hold MCAS testing. then I think that would happen.
Ms. Robinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. So I can comment. I don't just have to ask clarifying questions right now. Okay, thank you. So I guess I would say if we want our students back in full-time, and we know we have some catching up to do, I think it only makes sense to not give the test this year, and allow the teachers to teach what's been missing over the course of the year. And just especially for our juniors, I know I've been asking this question a lot. It's been all over the place with the guidance. It was they're going to take it, and then they weren't going to take it, and now they might take it. And I just don't think that that's the. If they're not sure, I don't think that we can. And it just doesn't seem like a thing that we should have to provide this. Like that we have to prepare these kids for the test, and I'm guessing that junior teachers are not always the teachers who are prepared for teaching students, like to get kids ready for MCAS. Okay, that's usually what the sophomore teachers are doing. Not that they couldn't handle it. I'm sure they could absolutely handle it, but I'm just thinking that, why? Why do we want to put that onto another thing onto our teachers at the end of a very difficult year where they really want to cover more content? And I don't want to put words in the mouths of parents, but I'm guessing that there aren't many parents who want their kids back in school so that they can take the MCAS exam. I'm just thinking that that's not. Have we received any communication? Huh?
So you haven't gotten those emails?
Have we received any communication of parents who want to opt their kids? Do we know how many people want to opt their kids out already?
We haven't had any communications about that yet. We haven't, not that I know of, maybe,
No.
but I haven't heard of any.
We have not been given the final guidance about high school yet, but I will say that right now the priority is about getting students back into school.
Right.
They have pushed off the testing for elementary into May and the beginning of June. Right now, we're not going to know until April when they want high school students all in. So that could have an impact on the schedule or whether it's offered. I do know that the federal government has not allowed the waiver this year, and so that means the state doesn't have the option to take it off of the table, but they have been given more leeway in when it's given, and so it could even be in the fall in the length. So we're still anticipating that we may hear something, but we don't know that for sure.
Yeah. And just one more, can I just make one more point? And even with the ninth grade biology, it seems, I think we should take a look at the scores that come back with the kids who are in there now, who are getting more instruction, as opposed to the kids who are coming into school one day a week. I think that's an important thing for us to look at, because I'm guessing that the freshmen would have to take the biology exam as well.
If it was already given?
It was already given in January, so it would have to be given to the
It will be
students who are
yes.
taking it now. So, and I think that's an important thing to look at, it's a little bit of a different topic, but it's important data for us to take a look at.
Remember, if the students were taking it this semester and they don't take the exam, then they're going to have to wait until almost another year after they've finished the course to take, if they want to take the biology test.
It's something to think about.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Milady and then Mayor Cahill.
I'm going to be brief because I think it's important for us to keep in mind that this is a statement saying this is what we believe, and I think honestly it's just a very obvious way of saying it is asinine to expect these kids to come back and sit for standardized tests. We know about the social emotional needs that these kids have, the lack of engagement, and I don't know, just to be cynical, you want to sell coming back to school? MCAS is done. Like, no kid is coming in to take a standardized test. We will figure out a way to measure learning growth and learning loss. But to sit here and expect that we're going to come in, they're going to sit there and take the standardized test is just stupid. So I appreciate this as a value statement.
Thank you, Mr. Milady. Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Madam President. Ms. Robinson, your thoughts are really interesting because in some ways you suggesting that if we were to pass a resolution saying we shouldn't require MCAS this year, this spring. That's kind of neat and clean. This proposal has us voting to say that this year's juniors should not have to have it as a graduation requirement a year from June. And if there's a 3-year moratorium that's prospective, then this year's sophomores won't have to satisfy the graduation requirement of MCAS. And perhaps it means that this year's freshmen won't get a chance to take MCAS till they're seniors. That's a lot. It's a lot more than I'm comfortable with. As opposed to if we were going to pass a resolution saying, we all think that MCAS this year shouldn't be required. Maybe some juniors would want to take it this spring to pass it and get it out of the way. But if this was a proposal to say, we as a school committee think that MCAS this spring should not be mandated, I'd be with that. But there's a lot more here.
I saw Ms. Visnick's hand, and I'm going to call myself.
I just want to remind everybody that parents have the opportunity to opt out, and so a question to.
I just clarify, they get a zero. They're not. It's not optional. It's mandatory to take the test. If they don't take it, they can refuse to take it. The district gets it as a 0, and the student is just marked as, So it's not. There's not an opt-out option in MCAS. Although, if you just don't do it, you just don't do it. But there's a accountability. If we were in a year of accountability, it would count against the district as in the participation rate.
And score.
There's some nuance there, right? So I'll just.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that MCAS at any point has been optional. It's not there's not an opt-out, there isn't a parent opt-out for MCAS.
But in fact, any given parent on any given year does not allow their child to take that test.
Mm-hmm.
True or false?
We have, it has happened, but the student gets a grade of 0, and the district, it's held against the district for their participation rate and their score, and it lowers all of the scores for the whole district. So there's consequences aligned to it.
Okay.
Whether people are concerned about them or not is another story, but they exist. They do exist.
Okay. The other point I wanted to make is that not to discount any given scholarship, but the Abigail Adams Scholarship pays tuition, and in fact, the fees at any given school where it applies are much higher than the actual tuition. And so I think that to some extent, that is never called out. And again, I love our Dollars for Scholars Night. I love it when, my oldest son was a Abigail Adams winner. But financially speaking, it's really far less than half of what it costs to go to one of those schools. And so I think that needs to be called out versus, oh, look, you get free tuition at one of these schools. That makes you think that I got a free ride, when in fact, you're nowhere near a free ride.
I just want clarification on a couple of things that I heard. I think I heard that the testing would be delayed until May or June. And a question I always have is, how does that help us now with our students to assess now? I think what I'm hearing Dr. Trocheck say is that our LinkedIn and our benchmarks and our different assessments help the students in the here and now and are probably more useful to get our students back on track. Do we have any inkling of whether a later testing date would in any way, with a simplified test, get us results in a more timely fashion, or possibly are they going to be delayed by the delay of the
window for elementary right now through 5th grade is May 10th to June 11th. We finish school on June 18th, so we will not have those results back before students leave.
Okay.
We're still waiting for the exact testing window for grades 6 through 8. And high school is scheduled for now in their normal testing window, but that also will coincide with when we're trying to get them back to school full-time.
Right.
So we don't know if there'll be a change to that. But we will not have this data back before the students leave.
And then, Dr. Trocheck, you talked about how the district has crosswalked the results from standardized tests to our own test. Is there a strong correlation, or is it?
Yes, so there is. Our Linkit benchmarks are very predictive. We can utilize ranges and data from Linkit to be predictive of success on MCAS, which is helpful, particularly if you're going towards a graduation requirement to have a competency determination. And, you know, it also sometimes aligns with, helps, I mean, we use MCAS data in a certain way, but we also have other data that we use that provides us some of that same information. I guess that was my point, of what I was saying.
So if I could just share my comments, I tend to agree with Mr. Milady, Ms. Robinson, Ms. Visnick, and even some of your points, Dr. McKenzie, that, you know, returning students to school should be our priority, focusing on their social emotional needs, filling the content gaps that may have occurred is a strong reason why I would support this. I think in terms of Mr. Milady saying that this opinion of our body is a value statement, I have to think we are so fortunate here in Beverly for all that we've accomplished in this past year. And I think that, as Ms. Visnick said, there's other districts that have also adopted similar resolutions. If I remember correctly, we may have been one of the abstentions or one of the two that actually didn't support this resolution when it came around during the, I guess it was a remote conference for our MASC, but just seeing how everything has played out and understanding how important relationships are for students, I would not want to send any of our students in this year or next year to sit and take a test, no matter how abbreviated, no matter, you know, how, it just seems like the wrong thing to do. So I support this resolution. I hear Mayor Cahill, if there's amendments that wish to be made to maybe say 2 years or reevaluate, you know, that might be something that would be a compromise. But it just feels wrong to send students in for this test when we already are doing our diagnostics and identifying our students ourselves. Dr. McKenzie.
Thanks. I just want to close with a comment. I feel like I've asked lots of questions and I feel good about the responses. As a person who works in many districts and also just, you know, sort of juggles the thinking around multiple children in a household with different learning needs, I like that there are diagnostic tools that are reliable. Just know that every district does not have reliable diagnostic tools. So we are grateful for that Beverly has that, but I think a little universally about the things we may not know with this. That said, we're speaking about Beverly specifically. I think, you know, I would like to offer that we consider maybe amending some of the language. Like, I'm all on board minus wanting to agree to a 3-year moratorium. I don't think that there's enough information or guidance for us to know that we can ask for that and not lose some other things. So I'm not sure if there's an appetite to consider amending that language to saying perhaps 2 years, but that would be my friendly amendment to that.
Okay. Mayor Cahill?
Thank you. You know, somewhat along the same lines, as I said, I could support saying that we call on the state to not require MCAS tests this school year. I mean, look, for a lot of reasons, right? Practically, they've of necessity pushed them off, and we're getting so late that they almost should just, you know, and yet I'm not comfortable saying that we should be saying that this year's juniors shouldn't be expected next year when we hope to be in person full-time soon, and we hope that our fall will be able to kick off a much more regular school year. I'm not ready to or comfortable making a statement that says that this year's juniors shouldn't at some point next year be ready to pass an exam that would have them demonstrate mastery over the subject matter that they, in a normal time, would have been expected to be ready to perform on by spring of their sophomore year. So I'm comfortable with less of the language, I guess, than Dr. McKenzie stated. I would be willing to pass something that was much more kind of stripped down and said, no MCAS this school year. But I don't want to push that if you folks are comfortable with doing more. You know, if that's the case, I'm fine with, you know, with voting no on it, which is okay, right? So I don't want to gum it up or slow it down either. There's a lot to do here.
Thank you. And recognizing that it is already 8:06 and we have Dr. Chirocek's presentations ahead of us, a final thought?
I just feel that we should take into consideration that our children that came to the high school last year, fresh as freshmen, to a brand-new school with brand-new friends, got stripped of their first year of high school. They literally only had a third of a year, and their whole world got turned upside down. And those freshmen are now sophomores that are struggling 1 or 2 days a week in school. I can relate with Lorinda on that. And I feel that if we make them take those MCASs next year, that we're just setting them up to fail for their junior year of MCAS.
Thank you. So I've heard a couple people tease an amendment to this, but I've also, right now, our motion on the table is to adopt it as drafted. Dr.
Can I just
Chirocek?
make a technical correction?
Okay,
Education Secretary is James Pizer, and Jeff Riley is the Commissioner of Education.
okay.
So I don't want, don't
Commission-
you want to have you mail it to anyone when it doesn't say the right people?
I'm going to change it to Commissioner of Education. Okay, thank you.
Personally, right now, I really don't want to talk to either of those people.
Was your intention to send it to both of them? Or Commissioner Riley? You have his name. Commissioner Riley. Okay. So we'll do that as a friendly amendment. Is there any further amendment, or are we ready to vote on the main motion, which is as presented with that slight correction to title? Dr. McKenzie?
I'd like to offer an amendment for a 2-year moratorium with the language saying that in year 2, the purpose of the testing will be for diagnostic and not accountability for students and staff.
So the proposed amendment, which is on the table looking for a second, would be for a 2-year moratorium with diagnostic and not accountability.
So I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but
Okay.
I'm definitely not for it this year.
Okay.
Should it be offered next year, the purpose would not be for the typical purpose. It would be for the purpose of diagnostic alignment. So for example, if we have a way to crosswalk it now, I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity to do that, say, next year to see how we are progressing, but
Okay.
not for evaluative purposes where there will be accountability measures that could harm students or staff or faculty. So that would be my suggestion for that.
Okay, so in essence, just this year not offer, next year offer, but to use it in a different manner. Okay. Is there a second for that amendment? Mr. Milady, is that a second? Okay. So now, for the amended motion, we will need to take a vote on the amendment before we return to the main motion. Is there any conversation about the amendment? Do people need it restated? I have it as a 2-year moratorium with the second year being the test conducted in a diagnostic and not accountable, in a diagnostic fashion and not used for accountability, essentially. Is that it? Okay.
Ways that could be punitive to students or staff.
Okay, that could be punitive to students or staff. Okay. Okay, so a motion and a second. Any other comment? Oh, Ms. Robinson?
I guess I just want to question, how would we do that? Like, how would they be graded if they weren't going to be evaluated for the purpose of graduation requirements? I guess I'm just a little confused by that. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know how we would do that.
Yeah, I think it is going along with the hold harmless statement, where I think right now we have ways of sort of verifying, right, the diagnostic tools we use in district. And one of the ways we do that is in comparison to the MCAS. So my concern is that if we don't do that 2 years in a row, there could be some wiggle room for how well we're doing that assessment. But you can do the diagnostic aspect of it, meaning that it doesn't have any sort of negative consequences in terms of, one's grading and so forth. It's more about having that diagnostic comparison. And, there could be a decision that it does not need to be punitive. And, I get the whole harmless language, I think, is the best way to put that, that it's really for informational purposes that we think it could be useful, but not to be used for any sort of punitive decisions. And that goes for I guess, our accountability too as a district. So again, just a way to ensure that we do have a way to check our internal validity with our own testing, just by having another way to do that. Like, that sounds like has already been happening.
Okay.
And as a reminder, we will not actually execute our resolution. We will forward it along to those that hold the power. Okay. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Those in favor of the amendment to the second point of the be it resolved, say aye. Aye. Oh, yeah. So it's 3. And those opposed to the amendment? That's also 3? Are you? This is just the amendment to the language.
No, I hear you. I hear desires in all directions with this, and I don't want to tilt the scales. I'll abstain.
So it's 3-3, and I can't remember in Robert's rules.
It fails.
I think that means the motion fails.
That means it fails.
Okay. Yes.
So I think that my positive Patty persona wants to think that there's strength in numbers, and that based on the fact that back in whenever we had our virtual meeting with MCAS, with the MASC, that 112 communities voted for this, and that the strength in that number and us all having the same language, which is why I took the amendment off of that site, that there's something to be said for that. You know, if we're going to have some leverage or some, you know, way of convincing the state to do something, I think we have to try to stay with one another along the same language. Although I love the ideas that you put forth, Dr. McKenzie, I voted no, and because of this idea of strength in numbers. And if the state gets 112 different resolutions, then there's nothing in common there, or there's not enough in common. So, thank you.
I heard something on NPR. I'm calling it myself. I heard something on NPR the other day that you know, you can challenge, you can agree, and you can challenge your agreement as well. You don't just have to disagree. But thank you for that thought. I think we're returning now to the main motion, which is the as drafted with the correction to the commissioner's title. Is there any more conversation? All those in favor? It's so awkward being chair, right? All those in favor of the draft resolution as presented with the typographical correction? We have 6, and Mayor Cahill, no? Okay. Okay. Mr. Milady?
So, Madam President, I have a question, just to be respectful of time. Oh, sorry, thank you. Just to be respectful of time, would it make sense that we, on our agenda for the committee reports, other than Ms. Visnick's, I think we might have to vote to accept money, that we push that aside for another meeting, just so we're not hearing the lights are flickering, so I know we have some more conversations, we have an equity report, and could we also, in addition, have Chief Warrant Officer Smith get bumped up a little bit, because
Yeah, I see how patiently you've been waiting. I was
Too
just
patient.
Too patient. Why don't we will table the policy till the end of the meeting if we have more time, and for updates and meetings, it's just F&F next week, Committee of the Whole, and the 24th is all I was going to say for that. So, please, Superintendent, you can introduce the field trip request from Chief Warrant Officer.
So come on up and join us. So I would say that this is the first time in a very long time that I've been making any overnight field trip requests, and I don't know, I'm sure you may have questions, but I wanted to say that the superintendent recommends that the committee consider an overnight field trip for our ROTC. Chief Warrant Officer Smith is here to tell us a little bit more about that. After talking both with Mrs. Taylor and with Chief Warrant Officer, we believe that they have some nice security measures in place, but I'm going to let him speak to that. So, and it's for 2 field trips, the same field trip, but 2 different groups of people.
Thank you. Yes, Madam President and Mayor. So just to address, obviously safety is a big concern. You know, my background in aviation maintenance, I understand that importance. So how we're addressing this, I mean, the big thing is lodging, how are we gonna lodge people? So the way we're doing this is by tents, individual tents. Everybody will have their own individual 1 to 2 person tent. That's how we're gonna be lodging.
Nope, now he is.
I was holding it.
Just let it go.
Oh, there, you- okay. So yeah, so lodging would be by tent, individuals, tents. Everybody will be masked throughout the training evolution. I've talked to the custodial staff. They're going to lend me a sanitizer spray that they use down at the elementary schools, a smaller pack version, so that I can spray the restroom facilities on a daily basis to make sure we maintain that cleanliness. And we're going to maintain, all regular social distancing requirements throughout our training. The first trip is a one-night trip where we're going to be doing orienteering or land navigation training. The Camp Curtis Guild has that facility there. And so that was the intent of that trip. Two-day thing to allow enough time for training. Train on Friday night, more train Saturday morning to give a chance to actually execute and earn the skill on Saturday. The second trip that we're doing is if you recall, that we normally do an annual 1-week leadership camp. We normally do that down south. Obviously, we weren't able to do that last year. But with this lodging model, I figured that we'd be able to also take advantage of that and do the 5-day training evolution with the same sort of logistical aspects. And we would basically incorporate our drill training, our physical training sort of aspects, as well as land navigation as part of that, but in a controlled environment. Again, still small base. There's no exterior going anywhere. We're not leaving the base. It's got to be contained right there. Small group. We're limiting our numbers and managing it.
Okay, Ms. Visnick.
First thing you know, I'm like your biggest fan. And I love everything about your program. My question for you is whether there's any planned testing before or after, especially for like the 5-day trip.
As of right now, we had not thought of anything specifically in regards to testing of that. I know both myself, I've already received my first vaccine, and I already have my second one scheduled. And the other instructors that will be participating with us as well, they have already received their vaccine. I do know the only other thing would be the fact that the students that are going, we want to make sure that nobody has any kind of symptoms prior to our departure, the sort of same way we would handle all our activities here, our teams and things that we do now. We don't do any testing with those, and we sort of would manage that same sort of aspect. If my safety protocol on that, though, is at any point, if anybody came up with any symptoms at all during our training, I would call a cease immediately to the training. And we would return and we would deal with it that way, because we don't have the means to, onesie twosies to try to determine that. If there was a concern, I would want to stop the complete training.
Thank you.
Follow up.
Sure.
Dr. Turchik, we talked about having testing at the high school, right? In your last presentation to us, you talked about a regular weekly scheduled testing. So if these cadets wanted to jump on that testing, that will be available to them, correct?
So the testing will be running weekly and on Thursday afternoons. So that testing is voluntary for any student and staff at the high school, and that'll be going weekly. So it would be available for them if they wanted to do that.
Mayor Cahill.
If I could, just to kind of go on that, I don't know what the dates of the week are here, but if the Thursday testing doesn't line up, they certainly can go to the Stop the Spread sites over in Salem, or we perhaps could make an accommodation here if need be. And, I like the idea of them getting tested before they go, close enough to leaving, and yet far enough before leaving that they'll get the results. I think that's a fair thing to ask on either side as well. I mean, does that make sense?
So the only thing I would see, the June 21st to 25th, they're out of school already. So the Stop the Spread site might be a better alternative on that one, because we're no longer in session.
Right.
But the May trip, certainly we would still be in session and aligning with that. That would be something that's available at the high school for all students and staff.
I would personally feel much more comfortable if that were part of the plan.
Can I follow up?
Sure, Mayor Cahill.
So the tents, where are they coming from?
So I've already polled the cadets themselves. I did a survey of who had this material, so I already have a number of who already has tents. I already have purchased 4 tents. Amazon has these 2-person tents for $20, so the cost is really low. If I needed to purchase more between now and then, we have the funds because of prior fundraising to be able to support that. So again, the cost would be minimal to none for the actual individual cadets.
And what are the dates?
So the first trip would be May 14th and 15th, of Friday night and Saturday. And the second trip is June 21st through 25th, that first week immediately following the end of school.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good weather for camping, hopefully.
Sir, you know, it's a Marine Corps JRTC unit. If it's not raining, we're not training.
So I'm going to call on myself. I was happy to see the MREs as the food choice. I think that one of my biggest concerns is when people are sharing food or eating in close proximity. So when you mentioned that the distancing guidelines would be followed, I assume with the MRE, I mean, there's minimal preparation that goes into that, but the students would have or the cadets would have their appropriate amount of space and whatnot.
Yes, we've done training there every year since I've been here. Again, last year's the only time we haven't, where we always have done a weekend trip down to Camp Curtis Guild. There's plenty of open space for us to sit down and break bread like that and still eat their individual meal. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Milady.
I just want to say thank you so much for bringing this forward. It's just a nice sense of optimism to see an overnight field trip on the agenda. And, you know, I have nothing but faith that if anyone can pull this off, it's you and your team. So thank you very much. And you guys are making history in the city with this right now. So thank you.
Do I hear a motion there, Mr. Milady?
Somewhere in there, I believe there is a motion to approve the field trip, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Milady and Mayor Cahill. We have a motion and a second to approve the 2 field trips, the May 14, 15, and June 21 through 25. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Looks like we are ready to vote. All those in favor of approving the overnight field trips? And that's 7-0. Have a wonderful time. I wish you the best weather.
Thank you, committee. Thank you for all you do.
Okay. Yeah, I think Dr. Churchick will have you continue on, and we can pick up our policy work later.
Thank you very much. I have 2 other items on the superintendent's report this evening. I have 2 other items on the superintendent's report this evening. The first is the continuation of the discussion around our equity audit, and I am going to turn it over to Dr. Morgan to start us off.
Thank you, Dr. Chirocek, and good evening to each of you. Tonight, we will review the final 3 areas of the equity audit. 1, over and underrepresentation in special education. 2, school culture and climate. And 3, staff diversity and recruiting. As mentioned in our last meeting, the summary of each area, its findings, and the recommendations are included in the written report, which will be forwarded to the full committee. Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
You've seen this slide a few times now. It's our why, which guides our audit and the implementation and subsequent recommendations. We want every student to experience success. And if we want to make this happen, we have to understand the unique challenges and barriers that are faced by individual students. That is, understanding where we have been successful and where we might improve. Understanding the latter enables us to thoughtfully provide the right types of supports to help students overcome existing barriers so that they may realize their own versions of the American dream. Our next slide. The 8th area we examined was over/under racial representation in special education. In other words, is there a disproportionate number of minoritized students identified for special education in Beverly Public Schools? In a review by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Beverly Public Schools was not identified as having significant disproportionality by race or ethnicity in special education identification, placement, or discipline. While meeting this level of compliance is great news, a review of the data does offer a couple areas where there is elevated proportionality. This leaves room for further review. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education calculated a risk ratio for each of the 7 racial ethnic groups of students in our district. They include Asian, Black, Latino, multiracial, Native American, Native Hawaiian, and white. A risk ratio represents the likelihood that students in one racial ethnic group will experience an outcome compared to the likelihood that students in all other racial groups in the district experience the same outcome. The data indicated slightly elevated rates for Asian and Black students in the communication disability category. There is a slightly elevated risk ratio for Latino students in the emotional disability category. There is a slightly elevated risk ratio for Black students placed in separate settings. Our next slide, please. So how do we address these findings? First, we know that we have to begin engaging teachers, administrators, and every other staff at all levels in professional development. And this is regarding cultural competency, diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and all other related issues. Second, we will have to be intentional in implementing practices related to the Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a way of thinking about teaching and learning that helps give all students an equal opportunity to succeed. This approach offers flexibility in the way students access material, engage with it, and really demonstrate what they know. Developing lesson plans in this way helps all students, but it may be especially helpful for students with learning and thinking differences. You all may have heard of Universal Design for Learning, and the name implies a framework for teaching and reaching every student. But that's not the premise of UDL. It is not designed to teach all students, but rather to teach those students who have some type of barrier. The district will further continue to increase access to grade level standards for all students through inclusive practices, providing both reinforcement and enrichment opportunities as part of the UDL model and co-teaching model, and to work together to foster a positive climate and culture that really supports student learning. The district will also explore establishing a mentoring program. Now, this is a bit out of the box theoretically, but as a district, we do pride ourselves in being innovators. Our initial design for a mentoring program would include both district staff and members of our community. I think Ms. Abel said it best this evening. Relationships are important to students. And mentorship in our schools can have the power to significantly impact student and personal life trajectories. And if we're really intentional around how and with whom we pair our students, we believe these interventions and these interactions may have a direct impact on 6 of our 10 equity audit areas, numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Dr. Chirocek will now discuss school culture and climate.
All right, thank you. So when we think about schools, especially our schools here in Beverly, what most often comes to mind are our amazing buildings that we are so fortunate to have, or how we describe the roles and responsibilities of our teachers and staff. What we don't often discuss quite as often is the ongoing work that schools must take on to create a positive climate and culture to improve learning opportunities for students. The benefits of positive school culture and climate include highly engaged students and staff, fewer disciplinary actions, improved attendance, and an increase in the levels of student achievement. These are the things that we want for all of our school community. And before I go too far, I think it's important to define school culture and climate within the context of this equity audit. So school culture, when in the manner in which we're using it, refers to the way administrators, teachers, and other staff members work together and the set of beliefs, values, and assumptions that they share. And school climate refers to the school's effects on students, including teaching practices and diversity, and the relationship among administrators, teachers, parents, and students. So how do we measure these 2 important areas? In keeping with our strategy of utilizing parent and student surveys to collect feedback throughout this very unusual year, the district designed and sent a survey to families of students in the elementary, middle, and high schools in November and December of 2020 that included questions regarding culture and climate. We use this feedback as a starting point. The feedback that we received in these surveys indicate that overall our families and students largely perceive that our school staff are generally thoughtful and attentive when communicating with and serving students and families. Prior to the closure, the district had been participating in the VOCAL, which is the Views of Climate and Learning Survey, administered by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to students in grades 5, 8, and 10. And it surveyed their perceptions of school climate. The survey was administered digitally and actually as the final section in the MCAS assessment. So we had a lot of participation from all students. In this survey, the climate was categorized by 3 core areas, with 3 subcategories included. The 3 primary areas were engagement, safety, and environment. Based on the results, students in grades 5 and 10 had more favorable perceptions in the engagement, safety, and environment categories than students in grade 8. The data collected in 2018 will serve as a baseline. However, due to the closure, 2 subsequent surveys have since been missed. So we're lacking a little bit of follow-up data on that. So going forward, we want to be more intentional in understanding the perspective of our families with differences in order to promote belonging and inclusiveness. Using the vocal survey as a starting point, we're going to continue to survey students in all 3 areas. The district will administer a follow-up climate survey for students to maintain continued focus on improvement in any of the identified areas. We plan to begin engaging teachers, administrators, and other staff at all levels in professional development. I think we have utilized that recommendation over and over again. Professional development regarding cultural competency, diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and related issues. And we examine student feedback as one of our equity areas. So this is one way we honor student voices. We'll take this opportunity to incorporate the shared narratives of any of those marginalized in this audit and include the findings in the policies that will identify and address areas of inequity.
Our final area this evening is staff diversity and recruiting. Currently, there are 20 minoritized staff of all levels in the district, which include 5 black staff, 4 Asian staff, and 11 Latino staff. Regarding recruiting, currently listings are posted on the School Spring website. The site is popular in the education sector and attracts job seekers nationwide who are looking for education roles. This is a good option, and certainly we should continue. But if we want diverse staff, there are a couple of considerations. Number 1 is how we build and develop relationships with institutions and organizations. And number 2, we cannot say that we want more diverse staff without considering what measures are in place, 1, to attract staff, and 2, to support diverse staff. In other words, how do we connect with a diverse work stream, and how do we offer those staff the supports necessary to stick around? And this point is critical to consider because if there are no support systems for diverse staff once you bring them into the district, then there's really little reason for them to stick around. And so a separate consideration, and equally important, is salary. When deciding among districts, salary considerations are important. Therefore, it is vital that we are competitive with our neighboring districts. So, what is our plan to address staff diversity and recruiting? We know that part of the answer to this question is in retention. As a district committed to innovation, Beverly Public Schools, under the encouragement of Dr. Chirocek, has taken the lead in establishing an affinity group for educators of color in the North Shore area. The first meeting was held this past Monday on March the 8th and included staff of color from the following districts and school: Beverly, Chelsea, Essex North Shore, Manchester Essex Regional, Marblehead, Swampscott, and the Landmark School. Another retention measure is through our district leadership pipeline. We can expand our district leadership pipeline to include more diverse staff, and as with any pipeline process, there must be intentionality. This means identifying staff to begin the mentorship process, and we do this by delegating various leadership tasks to them. We can tap staff to lead building committees, organize a school event, analyze a data set, lead a professional development session, attend a central office meeting, or even help lead the charge in a building when a leader is absent. An improved method of recruiting includes building on partnerships with higher education institutions inside our catchment area and also developing relationships with institutions outside of our region, both with traditionally white and minority-serving schools. We must also consider partnerships with minority-serving organizations in the area, which in themselves maintain a network that could include candidates that fit well with the district. We look forward to our question and answer session with all of you in 2 weeks. Dr. Chirocek.
Thank you. So we will be sending out to you the final report, the actual audit report, and I think hopefully in the next week but well in advance of the meeting on the 24th. That will give you an opportunity to read through it. And as we said, we think it'll be a really powerful opportunity to have question and answers at that session around any of the items that we've presented so far, and any discussion and conversation about things that we've brought forward. So we look forward to that. So thank you very much. Thank you. And
Madam President, brief recess?
Sure. Okay, we're returning to order. It's 8:40 PM. And Dr. Chirocek, if you would bring us the latest information.
All right, I'm going to jump back in with updates, information about reopening our schools. So I think one of the comments that was made last week before we left was, you never know what could happen in a week. Well, we now know that even more can happen in a week. Over this past week, and actually it was at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, the commissioner released his guidance regarding events that have taken place. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of how it works, but the commissioner works as I work under a school committee, he works under the Board of Education. And so the commissioner went to the Board of Education and requested the authority to determine how we can interpret structured learning time, and I'll have a slide on that a little further. But basically, in essence, what happened was granted the authority to determine that only in-person learning will be accepted as structured learning time after certain deadlines. And so I'll have some information on that as we go forward. So that brings us to our a plan for Beverly. What will that look like to continue our transition to full in-person learning? Before we begin, I wanted to sort of just share a little of information. We heard earlier from some doctors and medical people as they spoke out about the risk factors and the transmission of COVID in Massachusetts and in general in this area. I thought this was a pretty nice depiction of the difference of where we were on January 3rd and where we were in the end of February. So as you can see, the transmission rates and the rates have improved significantly across the Commonwealth. As I always do, I'm providing you an update on some data as to how we're doing here in Beverly. I got this update today from Teresa Kirsch and the Board of Health. 7-day is the new metric, had shifted from trying to look at a 14-day set of data to 7-day data. This is two instances of 7-day data from 214 to 220. There were 71 cases and 24.63 daily incidence rate per 100,000. This past week, from February 28th to March 6th, there were only 58 cases and a 20.13 average incident rate per 100,000. So again, the trend continues to go down in our transmission rate here in Beverly. This is the 3-week review. It's actually a little older, and this is based on the 14-day review. And the one area that was slightly higher, not much, was the incident rate per 100,000, and I didn't know, quite frankly, if that had to do with the extra testing that we had done. But as you can see, there was no change, and we were lower in our percent of positivity. This is just a reminder of the thresholds for community transmission. Beverly is falling still in the moderate transmission yellow, which is on the low end, the 10 to 49 range, and we are well below the 5% in the past 7 days. So what happened today was that the commissioner released his guidance as to what districts need to consider in their return to full in-person instruction. And basically what he has shared out are deadlines for which time we have to be back in school. So he has presented a phased-in approach where phase 1 would require all elementary schools to be back full in-person by April 5th, require middle schools to be back full in-person by April 28th, and the high school dates will be released in April, so those dates are still to be determined. These are the deadlines. Beyond these dates, there's really not a vote that's even required. Those are the dates that we're required to be back in the schools, and it wouldn't matter whether we had a vote to say yes or no. The laws, it's a regulation by statute that we would have to be back in school on those days. This is really important, and I want anyone that's watching and listening, if your student is in remote learning, parents still have a choice for their students to learn remotely, and we will be sending out a survey. It will be going out tomorrow, and we'll hopefully we're going to have all of returns by Sunday evening, and parents will be asked, are you choosing to remain in person for the remainder of the year, or are you choosing to remain remote for the end of the year? Those are the only two options. You're either in person or you're remote, and you make that choice, and then we'll work with you from there. I wanted to take a minute to just sort of describe what structured learning time means, because that's the premise of the commissioner's powers that he was afforded from the Board of Ed. In a typical year, there are requirements as to the number of days that students must attend school and the number of hours that they must attend school cumulatively. In a typical year, it's 180 days, and at the high school level, it's 990 hours, and at the elementary level, it's 900 hours. In the 2021 school year, because we began the year with the 10 professional development days for teachers, that number was reduced to 170 school days. And at high school, the hours were adjusted to be 935 structured learning time hours. And at the elementary, and in Beverly, we declare our middle school under the elementary model, it's 850 structured learning time hours. So it's important for you to understand that those hours do not include any time that's scheduled for school breakfast, school lunch, passing between classes, homeroom, and recess. Those hours do not count towards structured learning. I know that's a question, particularly when you think about our elementary model where we're in for 4 hours now, but we do take a 15-minute snack break. So that snack break wouldn't count. And I know Ms. Brotherton sort of spoiled the surprise for everyone because she decided to announce early, which is fine. I have come forward tonight with a proposal for a timeline for transition to full in-person. We met as a leadership team. I think we've spent the last 24 hours sort of poring over the guidance, thinking about Beverly and thinking about what a transition might look like and might work for our students. We have really spent a lot of time hearing and listening to the guidance around how we're doing with transmission. I've told you before, and I mentioned in last week's meeting, we have really had very little, perhaps only one case of in-school transmission, and that was a suspected case of in-school transmission. And that is even with our elementary students being in the classrooms 5 days a week. So I'm coming forward tonight with a proposal that we consider sending our elementary students back in full person on regularly scheduled hours, and I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that, on March 29th. Middle school returned to full in-person for regularly scheduled hours on April 5th. I'm proposing that the work that we did last week, we continue to honor. I think that we worked really hard to compromise to find some really safe and great opportunities for our high schools to return. And please understand that the commissioner will be coming out in the next few weeks with more guidance around when high school needs to return to full in-person. So again, utilizing that transition that we set up last time. I also wanted to spend some time, and I think at the high school, when we spoke about high school last week, I was able to bring forward some information and feasibility about the feasibility studies versus around class sizes and around spacing in the classrooms. So the middle school is has a different structure than the high school. In each neighborhood, there are different size classrooms. So there are humanities classrooms and there are math science classrooms. There's 2 math science classrooms in each neighborhood and then 2 or 3 humanities classrooms in each neighborhood. There's different capacities of students that can fit based upon the spacing. So we did this feasibility study. It's the same information that we shared back in September. In our humanities classrooms, which are the smaller of the 2, we have a capacity for students, a 6-foot student capacity at 6 foot of 12 students per room. At 4.5 feet, we can fit 23 students per room, and at 3 feet, we can fit 30 students per room. That's just based upon putting the desks in and doing the measuring side of the chair to side of the chair. In the math science classrooms, they're much larger. We can have at 6 foot, we could have had a student capacity of 15 students. At 4.5 feet, we can have a student capacity of 25 students. And at 3 feet, we could fit 30 or more. We also in this building have 12 maker spaces. In the maker spaces, we have 3 on each floor, and those have a capacity at 4.5 feet of 28 students, and at 3 feet of 30 or more. But we didn't even go beyond that, how far beyond that would go. We also, I had Mrs. Oliver and her team also did a study outlining the number of sections that we have in each grade level and the number of enrollments in each one of those sections. So the middle school is a little bit different than the high school. At the high school, you have a lot of rotating schedules, so you have a lot of variability among your class sizes. They range from 18 to 30, and you're all over the place in terms of how many students are going to be in each class. Middle school is not really quite so much. In the 5th and 6th grade, we have 2-person teams. So it's very easy when we divide the number of students up, we divide them by whatever number, 50, 48, 47, and then we divide that into 2 teams. So typically every classroom has about the same enrollment. It's very unusual to have large fluctuations. In grade 5, right now, there are 13 sections of students. There are 7 of those sections that have 22 or less students in it. There are 5 sections that are at 23, and there is 1 section that is at 24. Again, remember that on the first floor where 5th grade resides, we have at least 6 math science classrooms that can hold up to 25. So space-wise, we're in pretty good shape. We do have a couple of classrooms that, if you are familiar with the building, have maybe some uniqueness to it. So there's 1 or 2 classrooms that we would be moving probably into a makerspace based upon a cutout of an office in the room or something like that. Grade 6 is probably the grade level that we have the most number of students. And again, some of this falls into how many students are in the RLA and how many are not. We have 14 sections in grade 6. Of the 14 sections, 5 of them have 22 or less students in it. 3 have 23, 4 have 24, and 2 sections are at 25. And of one of those sections, it is an inclusion classroom, so students are in and out, but at max capacity, they have 25 students.
Ms. Visnick, go ahead. Sorry.
Before we move off the slide, so basically what we're looking at from a concern point of view, if we overlay this slide with your previous one, is the 1 grade 5 section that is in the 24 row, the 4 grade, hey, wait, go back to purple, please. The 4 grade 6 sections that are 24, the 2 grade 6 sections that are 25, and then the 1 grade 7 section that's 25.
So-
because those ones would not fit at 4.5 feet
Yes.
per this slide. In
No, that-
humanities, they would not fit at 4.5 feet, so they could be
They are, but
moved.
they are in the
They
math
would be
side, they
able
would
to
be in
be
the
moved.
larger room, right? So we actually, what actually we're saying is that we don't have any space constraints based upon the capacity at 4.5 feet, because we have enough classrooms that hold up. There are no classrooms that exceed 25, and we have a capacity of 25. There are a couple classrooms that I know Mrs. Oliver has had conversations about moving based upon into a makerspace, which would be a large enough space. But basically what this is saying is that we don't have constraints around spaces. We have adequate spaces. We have classrooms that are big enough to hold the number of students based at 4.5 foot distance.
Well, so your humanities set at 4.5 feet, it would hold 23.
Correct.
So that's why I called out those particular numbers. And so
Right.
for those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections, we have more than 8 maker spaces. They would have to be
They wouldn't be
moved,
in maker spaces.
Or we would put them at 3 feet. Those are our
No,
choices.
they would be in the math science rooms. There are 2, 4, 6. There are 24 math science. There are 12 neighborhoods.
So
times
we'd have
two.
the humanities teacher go teach in that science room. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
We would make adjustments to make sure that they were in a room meeting the capacity. Sorry if I was confusing you. I do want to just share 7th and 8th grade, because they have 5 core subjects. They're divided by 5s instead of 4s, which is the difference between the 7th and the 5th and 6th and the 7th and 8th. And we only have 1 class in both grades that exceeds 22. So all of those classes are under 22 in enrollments. And so any classroom on any of those spaces would fit for them. So I want to kind of go back to when I talked a little bit here on this slide about regularly scheduled hours. While the proposal is for a full in-person, one of the things that we would like to propose is that that schedule actually maintain the current schedule that we have on Wednesdays. So a dismissal at noon for elementaries and a dismissal at 1 for the middle school. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but most of them have to do with our ability to expand the number of lunches and to, within the schedule, be able to accommodate large groups and make sure that we can make them smaller. So if we were to offer the current schedule on Wednesdays, we would utilize those afternoons. It would be a dismissal, not a shift to remote. Students would go home and there would not be a requirement for them to sign back on. We would still be able to meet the requirements of structured learning time with that model, and the teachers would spend the afternoon having their content time and their team time. And that eliminates the need for us to push those into other parts of the day, because we would need an expanded amount of time to use to have 4 lunches for each of those grade levels. So we would be expanding from 4 lunches to 8 lunches at the middle school, and the elementary schools are working through their lunch schedules in a similar way. It also would provide the team and content time, and quite frankly, I think throughout the closure, we kept saying we're going to make note of the things that are working well and what we've discovered despite the difficulties that we faced, what are the things that have worked well and how can we take those forward? And one of them has been the collaboration and the team time and the content time, and the ability for teachers to have that opportunity to plan, to take a look at how they can address re-engagement, student support, social emotional learning, utilize that time to review grade level roadmaps, academic needs, all of those things. And then finally, talking with the middle school team, the ability to kind of expand their schedule. Traditionally, last year, they had a 45-minute block schedule where every class was 45 minutes long. What they're looking at right now is I would call it a limited waterfall. There's a waterfall effect. One class drops off, so they would only have 4 sections. The first section would be 60 minutes, and then the next 3 would be 70 minutes, which reduces the number of transitions for students. I do want to note that in the middle school, teachers would still be moving from room to room. Students are not moving from room to room, but they give them that opportunity to have longer periods of time with their teachers. So here's what we're proposing for regularly scheduled hours, to go back to that. At the elementary school, the regularly scheduled hours, full in, would be 7:55 to 2 on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday would maintain the current schedule that we have right now, which is 7:55 to 12. Same thing at middle school, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 8:45 to 3. Maintaining Wednesday, the schedule that we have right now, which is 8:45 to 1. And then finally, the proposal right now is to just leave high school in the model that you all voted on last week. And again, knowing that there's more guidance coming, and there will likely be a change, but that's where we would be. Another thing that, looking at the schedule, the staggered schedule that I had proposed, where we start with the elementary on the 29th, part of the reason, or another benefit that we would receive from that, would be that we would be able to begin opening up transportation on a larger scale, particularly at the high school where we have not been able to offer transportation yet. Given the shift to the 2/3 model on the 29th, if we align the shift at elementary, I mean, we have to do it a week later on the 5th, but if we align it on the 29th, we're able to capitalize the opportunity to not disrupt transportation and begin to open up buses for students in high school who are now being required to come to school on more days. I did get a lot of feedback from parents that they were thrilled about the opportunity to have more in-days, but they had some concerns about the ability to get there. So being able to add additional transportation is one benefit that we would get. Within our transportation, if in fact the proposed schedule that I gave you is adopted, we would begin opening up transportation for high school, beginning with students that are 2 miles and out. And we'd like to begin that on March 29th. The plan would be that we actually have already sent a survey out to parents to say, are you interested in transportation? Offering it at 2 and out, taking a look at the routes and the number of seats that we have, scaling in, maybe offering it at 1.8 miles and out to the next group, and then seeing how many seats we have, and then offering it again at 1.6, so that we give people the opportunity to get on the buses and come to school. And again, that at a 2/3 model, I did ask Mr. Cruikshank to make sure that he does one seating arrangement so that when we do condense back into full in, we would have seats reserved for everyone. So while it may, so I want to make that caveat that a bus may not look full, but it might be full because we're in the 2/3 cohort model.
I think we have a question real quickly. It's related to
Go
this
ahead.
slide.
It's probably easier.
Thank you. I guess I don't understand why we can't open the transportation to the high schoolers unless we bring the elementary back on the same day.
So the elementary school gets out at noon, the high school gets out at 11:50. We use the same buses to run those routes. So the elementary routes are leaving the school at noon to return the elementary students. They need to finish that run, and then they need to return to the high school. So it's not that we can't, but it would make it a little bit easier, because right now, if we aren't able to, if we have to wait for the elementary runs to be done, then high school students are dismissed at 11:50, and we have to find somewhere to have them wait for a bus that won't get there till 12:30. So there's a 40-minute period of time that and the high school students that get out at 11:50 have to sign back onto the computer at 12:50. So there's just an hour. So if they spend 40 minutes waiting for the bus and then 20 minutes on the ride home, they're walking in the door and they're signing on to their learning. So it just makes it a little tighter. Honestly, we would still have to do that on Wednesdays because we would be remaining in the model, but it would be a lot easier for the high school to find the space and supervision for students for that one day than for all 5 days.
Okay, and we do not yet do we have any early survey results yet?
Well, we actually had 44 responses at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and only 3 of the 44 that were requesting it were inside the 2.0 miles. So people got the message, and they were students that lived outside of the 2.0 range. Oh, yes, so typically we have a transportation fee. We have some families that are paying a transportation fee on a prorated basis based upon the cohort model. So at the middle school, say, we might have some riders who have been paying a fee, but they've only been paying half the fee because their students all year long have only been riding on a couple of days. We believe that for these last 13 weeks, we would waive the fee for the students that are coming on for this at the high school.
Go ahead, Dr. McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question about what the rubrics are telling us about numbers of riders. Do we have a way to gauge that so we can know about distancing on the actual buses?
Yeah, so actually, and you, that was probably before you were on the committee, there was extensive transportation guidance that was issued in the summer as to how many riders we could have. It was limited to 21 students on a bus at a maximum distancing with alternating seat patterns. However, in the last 2 weeks, the guidance has lifted the capacity numbers, and they haven't allowed students, they still would like to try to have 3-foot distancing, but then in the same breath, they've said they've lifted the capacity and they can have up to 2 in a seat. So, again, that's whether we choose to do that or not is another story. I think what we're looking at right now is just determining how many riders we have, what that capacity should look like. But I will say that at the middle school, when those 2 cohorts combine, we'll probably have some routes that have 40 students on a bus. Again, I would only say there has been no transmission on the buses, and they would be, safety measures would be in place. They were required to wear masks, forward-facing in their seats, the same as all of the, really, the data hasn't shown that there's been difficulty or transmission on the buses, so.
Okay, looking at the time, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Give some more.
So the other, and then finally, as I said, we're going to be reviewing the middle school transportation as we combine the cohorts. And then elementary transportation will be reviewed and increased where we would have that available. This bottom bullet really just speaks a little bit, Ms. Visnick, to the PM run at the high school. If the dismissals at 11:50 and the buses can't get there until at least 2:20 or 2:30, we'd need space to be provided for them to students. And the suggestion is that we would probably offer a grab and go lunch and have them in the cafeteria at 6-foot distancing while they waited for the bus, as well as we can require that.
12:20, correct?
Huh?
I think you said 2:20, but it's 12:20.
12:20, yes, sorry. Again, this is the transportation would align with the proposed return to full in-person. Elementary schools would their dismissal time would be 2 o'clock, and the buses would run at that time. The middle school, same thing. In the high school, we would be implementing. We won't be implementing transportation until the 29th, so there would be a week when seniors would not be able to have the transportation at that time. We're still offering the surveillance testing that we talked about. That surveillance testing will begin March 18th. I have some questions next to the time. I don't think we haven't got final determination on the time, but I do know that we are confirmed to begin on the 18th. We would offer that at the high school, and then we would offer the opportunity for testing for staff and students in conjunction with the planned opening, for example, at the middle school of April 5th.
And Cataldo said they'd have no problem starting it as early as we want.
And Mrs. Taylor is working on how to send out parent consent forms and allow to get, so we want to do that digitally so that we would mark that right in so students would go in and have those consent forms on file before they show up for testing. And again, we can work around whatever availability Cataldo has. I think Ms. Robinson had suggested that we try to have it open at dismissal so students wouldn't have to come back later. And so we're looking at maybe 12 to 6. Vaccinations for school staff. The state has designated 4 days at their mass vac sites where they will only offer seats to teachers. So beginning on March 27th, April 3rd, April 10th, and April 11th, it's a Saturday, and Sunday. Those days are reserved for educators, and the mass vaccination sites will only be open for them. And then the district is continuing in partnership to explore options for expanding staff-specific days with other providers. That's something that, we're waiting on guidance. It is not for lack of wanting to do it on our part. The Department of Public Health, and I think the mayor can speak a little bit more to this, has not allowed for individual partnerships for individual districts to do some of their clinics. And they've actually shut down a couple of districts. So I think we're still investigating how best to be able to do that.
Ms. Robinson, do you have a question?
Just want to, you may not know the answer to this, but would that be the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
I do not know, but they're
Guessing?
saying first dose, so I don't know.
Because
I don't know. I don't think
then
that,
there's not are they going to be there for 3 more weeks after or 4 more weeks
I
after
don't know the
that?
answer to that.
That's
This just came out at around 3:30 today, and it came out of the, what office did it come out of? Health and Human Services. So they did not mention which one it is. They just called it a first dose appointment. So whether it's Johnson & Johnson or the first dose for something and you'll get your second appointment when you go in to sign up, I'm not sure. But I do know that's where what we have right now. And as we have said, information is forthcoming on a regular basis, so it's always evolving.
Okay, before we put a motion on the table, I think we should all have the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions. Dr. Trocheck has presented a recommendation. Ms. Visnick?
I don't have any additional questions, but I want to say a few things, so I will stop until the questions are asked.
I'm not seeing any hands for questions. Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Trocheck, can you walk us through how lunch will be handled?
Yep. I can speak specifically to the middle school because I have had more planning time with the middle school. I feel like I've been with Ms. Oliver for quite a bit the last couple of days. The plan, I believe, and Ms. Oliver, you can join us up here if you want. If I say anything incorrect, you can correct me. I know that we have looked at scheduling. As you know, there are 2 full cafeterias at the middle school. Each cafeteria has the capacity for 120 students at a time at 6-foot distancing at desks. So we would leave the desks set up. I think if you walk through the cafeteria, you'll see the desks that are set up now. We utilize them for breakfast now. That's where students are eating breakfast. We utilize them for snack breaks already, sometimes in inclement weather. So we know the procedures. It has assigned seating. We record who sits in what seats. That's how we would be able to understand contact tracing if we needed to do it. But they are 6-foot distanced. And students don't take their masks off until they're seated, and they put their masks on before they get up again. Lunch would continue to be a grab and go. I talked with Christina Leal earlier, and she did confirm that. The lunches are scheduled at 4 lunches for each cafeteria, so it will be up to Ms. Oliver to assign whether it's neighborhood and 1.5 neighborhoods at a time or 1 neighborhood at a time based upon the number of students. But I believe the primary would be to begin first to look for an outside opportunity to eat. So you might want to.
Okay, so we're looking at 4 lunches, and we're dividing those lunches up into 3 neighborhoods. So for example, if we had a 5th grade lunch, we would use the 1st floor cafeteria, the 2nd floor cafeteria, and possibly an outside space. And if needed in inclement weather, we would use the gym. The idea is to get the lunches as small as possible. And just to put this out there, it's something that we'd like to do going forward altogether. So even beyond this year, looking at smaller lunches makes sense to us.
Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. Who will be required to monitor the lunches with, the students will obviously be unmasked, so who would it be required to monitor those lunches?
So currently, what we're looking at is having administrators in the lunchrooms, and also some of our global app teachers as well. So they would be assisting us, and possibly if we have put an ad out for lunch monitors and hall monitors, but that just happened today, so I'm not sure who we might have volunteering for that job.
So would it be a volunteer, would it be voluntary or would, no?
No, it would be an assigned duty.
Thank you.
Ms. Oliver, I have a question. I really appreciate hearing that the change to smaller lunches might be an ongoing option for the middle school. I have feedback from a couple of your customers that the lunchrooms get quite noisy and loud
Yes.
under normal situations. I do wonder if there is an opt-out for students who don't get the hangriness and would rather have a mask break outside or have an alternate, or are you really trying to very specifically have assigned seats and a repeatable schedule every single day? I guess I can see the value of both.
So I think what you're asking me is, are we making outside a priority?
I guess my question is, could students opt out of lunch? So to make the smaller lunchrooms happen, I know I have one child who's a bird and would rather never eat in school if she could. So, you know.
To be honest, that isn't something that we discussed, but it certainly is something we could discuss. And I do know that there are many students that feel the need to be in a smaller setting, that it can be a little overwhelming when you're with a lot of
The
students.
anxiety with
Yes.
COVID and noise and all of those
Yes.
things, I think. Okay. So thank you for considering that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Madam President. So the kids will be seated, they'll be 6 feet apart. In a traditional lunch, they eat and they may have time to go outside and run around a little bit. Is that still part of the mix here or no?
So again, this is our first proposal for lunch. Another thought that we had was looking, for example, if we had a group in the 5th grade downstairs cafeteria, having 15 minutes for lunch, because they don't have to go through the lunch line, and 15 minutes outside, and then flopping a group. Does that make sense? Because we're in 3 cohorts, and so we would have some students outside, some students eating, and then they would switch.
Yeah. So what is the plan for the lunch period itself? What's the total length of time? Oops, sorry, what's the total length of time you're projecting for the lunch period?
Right now, 30 minutes.
So in normal times, how long does a typical child take to eat versus then socializing and at the table and/or looking to get outside and move around?
So in the past, and I can say this at the elementary level too, that lunches are often 30 minutes, and 30 minutes is a long amount of time. It doesn't typically take students 30 minutes to eat. And so then what happens is they want to go see their friends and move around the cafeterias. So the leadership team has been talking about ways to make that not happen, such as what I just had mentioned, with part of the time being outside and part of the time being in the cafeteria.
So you could conceivably, on a given day, because some of this is weather dependent, right?
Yes.
You could conceivably flip that outdoor and first floor group.
We could.
And then the third floor group may come downstairs and go outside after their 15 minutes of eating time as well.
Yep, we definitely could do that. Something to keep in mind, we are trying to keep transitions down to a minimum within the building as well, but yes, we could do
So
that.
I think I would love to also just share with all of you that the team has had about 11 hours to consider how they would do lunch for 1,400 students at the middle school. We really haven't had as much opportunity to work through all the scenarios. Each and every scenario that everyone raised is, I know, one that has come up. And so I think I want to give Mrs. Oliver a little break to not have to overcommit to anything when she hasn't had the opportunity for feedback. And typically what would happen is what happened today. She'll go forward with the staff, share what a potential idea for a schedule is, get feedback on the schedule, meet with smaller groups from her instructional instructional leadership team or with teachers to fine tune that schedule. So I just don't want to put her in a position where she's overcommitting on any particular thing. But I think the ideas are great because some of these ideas we hadn't maybe thought of or talked about. So just want to share that.
Dr. McKenzie, do you have a question?
Sure, thank you. I had a question based on the scenario that was just presented. Generally speaking, what is the turnaround time for there to be some sort of sanitation between lunches? Because that would be my concern with the flipped model, that if you have students essentially transition right after each other, I don't know that there's enough time, or if students themselves are sanitizing their areas. So can you just talk a little bit about the transition time for the actual prep for the next group time?
So we've talked about two different things. We've talked about students sanitizing their own space with guidance from whoever the adults are in the classroom. And we do have it built into the current schedule. And again, not having a lot of time to figure out the minute details of this, there is a 10-minute passing time that would allow for a 30-minute lunch for the cleaning and sanitation of everything. Thank you. Want to piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Trocheck said. I do really value teacher input, and we had proposed something and got some feedback and then revised what we were thinking. And so I don't want to commit to one particular thing tonight without speaking to the staff again. I think their voice is critical and important, and same with the assistant principals as well. So thank you for that.
Mayor Cahill? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to give Dr. McKenzie some input as well. As a former lunch lady here at this middle school who ran that pizza grab and go, there is a few minutes, about 10 minutes in between each lunch period, where there's usually 2 to 3 janitors on each floor. And as soon as the kids go, one janitor goes and usually picks up all the trash while the other one sweeps, and the other one takes their sanitizing cloth, washes the tables and all the seats around it. So I think it would probably take just about the same amount of time, instead of doing one big table and the seats, to be able to just do the individual tables.
And I think too, I just thought of this too. If you were scheduling them, you would still have your seating arrangement, so you could literally seat if you had 120 and 60 were outside and 60 were inside, you could assign those seats spread out, and then they could come to a different 60 seats because there's 100. So you would have, in the 30-minute period, you'd use all the seats only once, and then in the turnover, you would have, so that, and I think.
That isn't what I was hearing.
I'm making a suggestion. I don't know that
No.
anyone was.
I'm
No.
confused with the numbers, though.
No, there are the cafeteria has 120 desks. And in a 30-minute period, they would be assigning 120 students to that lunch. And so one option would be, if you have 15 out and 15 minutes outside and 15 minutes inside, you would assign the seats, and those desks would only be used once, and then there'd be a 10-minute transition. So again, I don't want to spend time on the logistics. It was just an idea and a thought about ways, but I think I was speaking to that one.
Mayor Cahill?
And I'm sorry for jumping in. I'm confused because and maybe this will help me. With remote learning and kids in the school, how many kids are in the 5th grade right now in school? Rough number.
Rough number.
60 minus 90, 270,
Okay, so.
I think, right? So you have 75 in Remote Learning Academy, and you would have had 360, so 360 minus, so 285.
So I had the mistaken impression earlier that you're going to fill the 3rd floor not fill, but put 120, which allows 6-foot distancing, put 120 down here, and have 120 more who need to go outside.
No.
Was I wrong in thinking that?
Well,
Yeah, it sounds it.
Yeah. I don't think it's quite that high. We do have 3 neighborhoods. So what I was saying is we would divide the neighborhoods up and to go to the 3 separate places. And we can be a little creative with that as well. For example, one neighborhood might have a little bit less than the other 2 neighborhoods.
In enrollment, number of students.
Right, but if each neighborhood is going to get a separate space,
Yeah.
then you're not going to be up as high as 120 in any given space because of RLA.
Correct. We
Okay.
were just saying that we have 120 desk chairs to put in each cafeteria.
That's the capacity of lunch
Right. Okay.
at a time.
Still a lot to sort.
Oh,
Yep.
And I guess one of my thoughts in asking about how long the kids take to eat and about going outside is, if, and I would imagine 30 minutes is required because the faculty have that 30 minutes to do something else. So the kids can't come back early.
right.
So we don't necessarily want them sitting at that desk for 30 minutes. That's not all, some kids will be fine with that, others won't do so well with it.
Yes.
And they're not going to need 30 minutes.
Pandemic or no pandemic.
Right. And they're not going to need 30 minutes to actually eat that lunch in front of them. So that's why I was asking about the ability to get them outside after they eat and get them to run, get them to.
And I
get
think
the
that's what
movement
Lisa
in.
was alluding to with some sort of a transition.
Right.
But
I got you. Which you could similarly do with the third floor, just it involves more, a longer walk.
Transition.
All right,
I
thank you.
don't want
Well,
us to get too trapped in the weeds. I see two more hands, but I'm just noticing the clock, and I do know that we have a few more items. So Ms. Coelho and then Ms. Visnick, and then maybe we can,
Just to piggyback for Mayor Cahill, so they are allotted 30 minutes for lunch, but in reality, they don't actually sit at that table for 30 minutes in lunch. Pre-pandemic, some of the kids are lucky to even get 8 minutes to sit and eat because of how long the lunch lines normally are. But you still have to take into consideration that it's probably going to take about anywhere from 8 to 11 minutes for those kids to actually get their lunches distancely and sit down at that table to eat. So they're not realistically going to have a full 30 minutes to sit there.
Ms. Visnick, one more question, point?
Yeah, I guess I have a question. Not necessarily, no, not about lunch. I mean, I have a lot of questions about lunch, but that's, my question is, as we continue to think about bringing more children back and bringing them back more hours, every single speaker that we've heard has spoken to mental health issues and anxiety. So I'm wondering, what is our mental health plan? Where is it? What is it? And where is that going to fit in the schedule of the day? Because as I mentioned last week, we cannot just expect that everybody's mental health issues will disappear because we bring them into this building for 6 hours, or any other building for 6 hours, 5 days a week, versus 4 hours, 5 days a week at elementary, or, however many hours here, 2 days a week, or whatever was our schedule at the high school. So where in our schedule are we going to address the mental health, and how are we going to address it, and with what resources are we going to address it?
Those
Or
are all
are
really
we
good
just going to say, come on back in and we think it'll be magic?
Well, that's not what we're going to say. I will say that, I think we've done a lot of thinking and a lot of discussing. One of the first and most important things that I hope can come of getting students back into the building is the ability to assess who needs some supports around mental health and who needs some supports around social emotional learning. And that begins with getting them back in and having them in a classroom and having the ability to have a trusting adult that's interacting with them on a regular basis. We have, I'm going to would you like to do this? Because, well, you do it. This is your thing. We have a professional development day on, do you need a mic? We have a professional development day planned for Friday, and so the bulk of our work is going to be talking about addressing some of the issues and some of the situations that we may come across. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Flaherty because she has it's her baby.
As you know, our day is, we're excited about it, and knowing that both our staff need some time for their own social, emotional, and self-care, and thinking about preparing for our students, that's the focus of the entire day. And it's about building relationships, SEL. We have a national speaker that's coming in. But in their mailboxes tomorrow, we bought a book for every staff member in the district that gives very specific strategies. We're missing one box that hasn't arrived yet. When it comes, we have one for each of you as well. And this is all about concrete, specific strategies that they can use to embed SEL into every course and every class that they have. So this will be a focus of our work on Friday.
In addition to that, we're working with the North Shore Consortium. I know that Ms. Splansky met Wednesday with a consultant. We're establishing a relationship with a consultant who's going to come in. Do you want to speak a little bit to what that might look like? Sure.
So the consortium is offering an opportunity for some increased clinical supervision of our school counselors on a consultative model. So they will come in and meet with our school counselors at various levels to provide, clinical supervision and help manage all of the growing mental health needs of our students. So that will begin actually immediately and will continue through next year.
Can you clarify on that? What do you mean manage? Are they going to carry their own caseload? Are we bringing in additional counselors?
In this specific model, this is just a clinical management, kind of clinical oversight model. So they won't be carrying their own caseloads, but they'll more help our counselors manage their caseloads and help connect students to outside agency support and families with outside support. So they wouldn't carry their own caseloads. We do have partnerships with counselors in the district who do carry their own caseloads, and we have increased some of those caseloads to help manage some of the increased need.
And we have some consultative services that are also available through the North Shore Consortium that we can be bringing in, right?
That's right. So for this year, we're starting off with the consultation to support the clinical supervision of our counselors. But moving forward to next year, I've also met with them to talk about them taking on some additional cases as well so that they can manage some of our students with mental health needs as well.
And that's in addition to the requests that we do have in the budget moving forward to increase our school adjustment counselors at both levels and an outreach counselor at the high school. So we are looking at increasing our counseling support staff in response to the needs that we know that we'll be identifying as we go forward. So.
Okay. Ms. Robinson.
I just wanted to know how many mask breaks the students will have per day and how long will they be?
I think that varies by grade level, but typically what we've been seeing is about 2 mass breaks per day, and it's between 10 and 15 minutes.
So that's now?
And they go outside. That happens now. Yep.
And with the longer day, what do we think?
Yeah, they would.
Lunch.
They would have the lunch, but I would anticipate that they would still be taking some breaks.
As well as encouraging opportunities for outdoor learning.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think at all levels, and I think this is important at the elementary level as well, to understand the ability to, I think we're really re-envisioning learning spaces and the use of our campuses. And this building in particular was built for an emphasis on utilizing outdoor learning spaces. The outdoor learning space out here has 3 classroom sections, and teachers do take their classes out there and use them. And that is always something that's available as an option. There are many spaces on this campus for expanding into the outdoors with classes. So, I know we all picture everybody sitting in one room all day, but that's not really what it would be. The reality is that there's opportunities for movement and opportunities for them to go outside. And I think, in addition, the proposal for the Wednesday that allows us to have the longer blocks makes that even more. I think it was challenging with a 45-minute block to gather the kids, get outside, and come back in for the next period. But a 70-minute block gives them a better opportunity to plan and utilize some of those options. So, at least that's our hope.
Okay. I'm not sure I see a lot of questions. I'm wondering if there is a motion to adopt the recommendations that Dr. Churchick outlined.
I'm happy to make a motion. I don't know, did you want to have you make your comments first, Ms. Bisbee?
No, I'll make my comments after the motion's on the table.
Do you want me to put it back up again?
Yeah, if you don't mind putting it back up. Sorry.
Mike. There you go.
I know, every time somebody yells Mike, I'm jumping. Yes, I'm happy to try to make a motion when I see the right
Hold on.
slide.
Yeah, let me get out of it. I'm not doing very well here with my driving the bus. There you go.
So I don't think we need to say anything about high school where we took our
Right,
votes, made our
that's just there,
decisions last
yeah.
week. I will move that we, with regards to our elementary schools, that on March 29th, we return to full in-person regularly scheduled hours. And with regards to our middle school, we return to full in-person on April 5th with regularly scheduled hours.
Do we have a second? I'll second that motion. We have a motion on the table now to move to return elementary schools on March 29th to full in-person for regular scheduled hours, and the middle school on April 5th for full in-person regularly scheduled hours. Ms. Visnick.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't, unlike last week, I don't have a prepared statement. When I left here last week, I thought we'd be coming back here tonight to talk about, to begin the conversations, as the term you used last week, taking our foot off the brake a little bit about our middle school. I didn't think we were, I thought we'd be in good shape with our elementary school because of what we've been doing all year long. And so I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I've scribbled a few notes, but I don't have a prepared statement. And I like to have a prepared statement so I don't go all over the place. But the first thing I want to say is something like Mr. Mulady said last week, which is, we're elected at the local level to oversee our local schools. And I believe that's actually in, I don't know if this is the right word, but the charter of our state is that we're supposed to have that control. And we're not getting that control right now. And we desperately asked for help and guidance at the beginning of the school year, and we got none. And I know that no one in this room can do anything about that, but I just really wanted to go on record as saying I am disappointed at best that the state didn't help us back in August. They demanded that we come up with a plan. We've had a plan that for the most part, especially for our elementary schools, we've been in school far more than many other communities. And now I feel like they're using a one-size-fits-all hammer, and we're actually being penalized for having done Herculean efforts up until this point. So, okay, that's like my little rant, my complaint. I want to revisit the fact that, this body has done a great job of compromising, and personally, at the beginning of the year, I didn't think anybody should go back, and I came tonight very open-minded to think about returning our children more often, especially based on what we've heard. As you heard me ask, I think we need a mental health plan, not just open the doors and let them in more often. But I am really, really stuck on the lunch and why we would rush back sooner than the state mandates that we need to get back when we haven't, as Ms. Oliver said, had time to consider all of the schedules and really think things through. And in the last 24 hours, things have changed so much yet again. And yet we know that with contact tracing that there is a very high correlation in between people who test positive who have eaten at restaurants. And so lunch, we had our own survey results that showed that people were very concerned about lunch. Even those people who wanted to come back full-time or close to full-time or 5 days a week, a tremendous percentage of people listed lunchtime as a concern. So, our transmission rates have been low to date because we have done a fantastic job with our mitigation efforts. And in 1 week from now, we're going to take our high school population from 400 a day and put it up to 600. And a week later, we're going to take that population and put it up into between 900 and 1,000 students a day in a building. We're not allowed to go to sporting events outside in large groups. We can't be together for weddings in large groups. Our own sporting events, we can't go to our away games and stand outside masked as adults. And we're about to put 1,000 children in our high school, and we could at least wait another week or two and see how that goes before we rush to bring 1,400 students back into this building when the state who's mandating that we do this say we have to do it. We don't have to do it. We don't have to rush into this. And finally, I will throw out, Mr. Mayor, I ask you to brace yourself for what I'm about to say. We don't have to do this. If we don't comply with the state mandate, we will lose our state funding, or we will use some percentage of the state funding for every day that we don't get our children in, quote unquote, enough hours. But we have, are you ready? I know you know where I'm going. We have an incredibly healthy reserve of funds in this city. And if we think that we don't want to expose our children by having them take their masks off and eat lunch, then we don't have to. We are in a fantastic financial state. We have an incredibly healthy rainy day fund. We expected this year to run at a deficit, and not only are we not running at a deficit, we will certify more free cash at the end of this year, and our rainy day fund will grow even bigger. We're not in a rainy day. We're in the middle of a year-long nor'easter. Some people say we're in the middle of the eye of the storm. And what happens after the eye passes is it gets worse. I feel incredibly strongly that we're rushing to this decision when we don't need to. We should wait and see how our high school change goes. And if we really, really look at the data and we're concerned about lunch, think outside the box. I challenge every single one of you. Get outside the box. If you're worried about lunch, if you don't want to take your mask off, if you don't want to eat in a cafeteria or a restaurant, we don't have to do this. Thank you.
I saw Ms. Coelho first. I don't know if Ms. Melody, you're on deck.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to say I am a huge fan of Dr. Sclaver and Dr. Dean. I am in favor of our kids trying to get back to school as soon as possible because I've seen the kids struggling and I've seen the mental health of the kids where they want to be in more. But I've also seen and heard from several teachers about their own mental health and about how they don't want to be full-time so fast, where none of them have even gotten their first round of vaccines. So yes, I am in favor, because of my own children's mental health, about getting the kids in and being concerned with them. But I think we also need to start taking into consideration how some of our teachers feel and how their mental health is going, and at least come into an agreement, like maybe meet in the middle somewhere so the teachers can at least get their first round of vaccines, because they have a huge concern too, and their mental health is a big concern because these are the people that are teaching our youth, and I feel we need to be respectful of them too and take their needs into consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Mr. Milady.
Thank you very much. I did have some time to jot down some notes before the meeting and during our intermission. And one of the things I came across was this quote that said, "We recognize that maybe not everyone's going to be happy, but we think we'll do better by making sure that everyone is involved in the process." And Commissioner Riley said that this past summer being interviewed by his alumni magazine at Harvard. And personally, I don't feel like I was involved in the process. I really would question the validity of that statement about who was involved, whether he involved paras or people in transportation or people cleaning the buildings or serving our food. And honestly, I think there's a lot of things that we can say that we should be proud of in Massachusetts, the way the state has handled the crisis, the way our city, the way our schools have handled the crisis. But there's also some things that, let's face it, we should not be proud of. And this vaccine rollout, this whole process has really shown that if you're privileged, you'll be able to get the vaccine before other people. The whole concept of the rollout assumes internet accessibility. It assumes internet reliability on top of that. And the biggest luxury of all is time. This is how my morning starts. Multiple tabs open, trying to find vaccine appointments for my friends. Can you imagine any other profession where people are on the front lines being asked to get a vaccine like they're trying to get tickets to a goddamn concert? The rollout has also made it possible, for people not eligible by the guidelines of the state and the CDC to skip ahead and get a dose of the vaccine because they're not checking. People seek out extra doses that are all of a sudden available because people might have missed an appointment. It rewards those who are seeking self-preservation. And let's face it, we all can justify the decisions that people had made if they wanted to get the shot before anybody else. And honestly, I am not judging you. That is not my place. That's not why I'm saying this. You all have families, and you're all doing what's best for them. And I don't blame you. If you lost faith that you would get the vaccine in time, by all means, I understand why you made that decision. So I'm asking us to think about, as a community, why do people feel like it's acceptable to get a vaccine when it's not their turn, when we know that people have had kids in their classroom, one-on-one in many cases since August, have not had a chance to become vaccinated? Would this have happened in phase 1 when the vaccine was only available to doctors and to first responders? I really don't think so. So what does that say about us when this has become an open, acceptable thing in society? And it's not a Beverly thing, it's not a Massachusetts thing, it's everywhere. So I'm very lucky, I'm very privileged. I'm scheduled to get my first round tomorrow afternoon at the Victoria Rocky Post because I have a healthcare system, I have a doctor that sent me a text of my eligibility. I clicked the link, filled out a form, and within 90 seconds it was scheduled. Now that's my privilege. And let's be very honest, a high BMI, but goodnight fatty delivers, so what am I gonna do? But while my BMI, my asthma, ended my dreams to become the next John Starks, I played power bench at the CYO at St. Anthony's. It did get me a dose, because when a door closes, the window's open, am I right? Anyway, I think it's important for us to just think about, just pause, this top-down approach to reopening, this predominantly laissez-faire approach to vaccination. It's flawed, it's deeply flawed. And I'm gonna ask that as a body, and I don't have the courage that you have, Lorinda, to say, let's not recognize it and risk not getting state funding. I don't have that courage. But I can say that we should try to hold off to reentry at the least possible date. We see the finish line. We have an end date. It's not going to solve everything. And while I can't control the lack of respect that some of our teachers and educators are facing at the state level, I think we can show the respect and admiration we have at the local level. And I really want to commend the mayor and the superintendent for the heroic efforts they're making to get members of our community a vaccine. You have tried your best, but if the system's flawed and the system's broke, it's hard. It's hard to play by the rules. And to all the members of our community, our friends and our neighbors, I can say for myself and for everyone here, we really do appreciate all the communication that you've given us on the phone and through emails. You shared with us some personal, deeply personal stories about your loved ones, about your jobs, about yourselves. And it's a good reminder, it's a healthy reminder of how important this position is and the position that all of our elected officials have. I know you love your kids, and I know you love your schools, and I know you love our staff. So please, please, please continue to show that love and support, and in the future show it at our budget hearings, and most importantly, show it at our ballots. Thank you.
I saw Mayor Cahill's hand first, then Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Madam President. So, lot here. We have had our elementary school kids in all year at 4.5-foot distancing. We made a decision, albeit in a 4-3 vote, but we made a decision last week that our high school kids would go in at a 4.5-foot distance. The proposal before us for the middle school ensures a 4.5-foot distancing. All of the data, and I said this last week, but I know we all are working through this every time we talk about it. All of the data from our own local data up through other communities around the state, across the country, and across the world, has consistently shown since last September that 4.5 foot is safe. 3 foot from the data shows to be safe. When the measures that we have all been party to and that, that our kids have followed and our staff have done an incredible job with all of it. When the measures have been taken and, the resources are there and the commitment's there, and that has been the case, we haven't seen transmission in our schools. And that has all been the case in an environment where there has not been access to vaccines. I don't say any of that lightly. I'm understanding and thinking about everything that is being said to us, and the concerns about our kids' mental health. We all feel it. We know that walking through the door won't magically, fix it all. Certainly, for a lot of the kids for whom the remote component has been, increasingly damaging, it certainly will improve things for them to get back in. I have confidence in our administrative team, that the resources we've all put to the task, they'll use to maximum benefit in terms of working to ensure that the kids' social, emotional, mental health needs are met. I understand that the commissioner complicated things at many levels today. I have felt an urgency to our middle school kids as well as our high school kids, and his setting a date of April 28th, I think, doesn't really reflect the fact that these kids do absolutely need to be in more now. The fact that, that our educational leadership have been able to identify and articulate for us that this 4.5 foot distancing can consistently be met really matters to me. Again, I have a lot of confidence in our administrators and our faculty's ability to do this safely. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thanks.
Sure. Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, Madam President. So I just wanted to start by saying many of us are comfortable with sending our students back when all of our teachers are vaccinated. I believe that we've our thoughts have really evolved since August. I think that people are much more comfortable bringing students back into the classroom. I think the big question is the numbers are getting better. We know that. We recognize that. It's time, almost. I heard a few times that people saying that we've had 11 hours to figure this out. That's not enough time to figure out anything. If we had thought about this, we're in the middle school right now. We would have taken a tour. We would have seen what we'd be looking at. We could have done that, but we didn't have enough time to figure that out before this meeting because we had 11 hours. Just don't think it's enough time. And in the interest of time, I couldn't agree more with Ms. Visnick, Ms. Coelho, and Mr. Milady, and they just everything. I echo all of their sentiments, and I just think we need a few more weeks, and out of respect for our educators, who will certainly be much more on the way to having a second vaccine by then.
Call myself briefly. April 5th is a special day for me. It's my birthday. And I think one of the gifts that I envision is for us to start that sorting process of assessing where the students are. And when you say more time, April 5th is actually, my daughter's April 4th is her birthday, so I know there's a countdown, 25 days till her birthday, so it's 26 days away. And I have a lot of faith that our educators are getting those calls, as Mr. Milady said, and are getting the appointments now. It's not perfect. It's not our fault. It's not their fault. It's not the students' fault. That the rollout of the vaccine hasn't been as smooth as it probably could have been. But I think that we do have more than 3 weeks until that April 5th date. And my observation, my experience, my personal relationships with people are that the students need more. And I think that the doctors that presented to us during the open portion of our meeting have presented a pretty clear indication about the risk balance that we have. And it feels that there's more risk of waiting too long than there would be for the educators, that the transmission with proper mask washing, with hand washing, with sanitizing, with distancing, remembering that it's not going to be a jump back in where the teachers are doing everything the same way that they used to, but that if we can start the transition in April, early April, it would give us, a couple of weeks before school vacation. It will give us an opportunity to start making those connections with those kids that really desperately need it. And so I'm comfortable with these dates. I had seen a number of emails that suggested the staff had been told possibly the 22nd or the 29th. And when I saw April 5th and I counted the number of days, I feel like as so much changes in 1 week, we have more than 3 weeks where hopefully a lot of the stars align. There's a concept of paving, and I believe that if we pave this and we all work together, all the details will sort out for lunch. That is my biggest concern as well. It's been a concern even pre-pandemic. And I think that, if we set the direction tonight and give our administrators the target dates that they are up for the challenge, they have kept our students very safe. They've kept our staff very safe up until this point. And more importantly, kept our students happy. I think that one of Ms. Visnick's observations was that there wasn't a mental health plan, but I have to tell you, the smiles on my kids' faces on the days that they come in person and the stories that they relate about how their day went are more meaningful than any of the academic learning that could be going on. And, that it's just 8 hours a week that they're here, right? And if we can give them a little bit more opportunity to build relationships with their teachers, with their teams, with their classmates, I mean, that's another thing. Just the way that it works out, if your student takes German, there's not as many students, so it's a pretty small cohort A, right? And they don't even know, some of the kids' faces because unfortunately with Google Meets, the cameras have been off. And I think we just really need to start this process. And I think April, 5th is, sufficiently far enough out that all the details will fall into place. So, thanks. Ms. Visnick?
What is a Roberts rule for, can we table? Because I think that, I would like to table this motion and give us all at least another week. And next week we have FNF and we could schedule and we could come back to talk about only this and make our decision at that point in time. And in between that week, we could have our favorite bean counter come back from vacation and tell us what would be the implications, the monetary implications, if we were to, for instance, vote to bring our middle schoolers back 5 days a week, or maybe 4 in early release on Wednesday, whatever, but not do lunch, right? Because I realize that by not doing lunch, we don't meet the hours, and then we have to consider the monetary penalty by the state. So I wish for us to table this for a week, give us all more than, as Ms. Robinson said, 11 hours to think about it, give our administrators more than 11 hours to plan for it. As you say, that would still give us plenty of time before April 5th, and it gives us more time to pursue potential other options.
Mayor Cahill.
I've got a couple of questions. Right, but I don't want to just kind of detour off.
Yeah.
Are you okay with a little more conversation before we?
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Trochek, we asked questions about the plan for middle school lunch. Could you articulate how elementary school lunch is going to be handled?
The elementary school, so we met today, this morning, and I don't have all of the details of what they had come up with, but I believe that the large part of their plan involves eating outside. And the majority of the planning that they have is that lunches would be served outside, that the inside spaces, much like they do their, so they've been already operating with snack breaks outside, and they have entire systems set up, and I believe they would be following those same routines for their lunch, only it would be longer, reserving available spaces that are available inside only for inclement weather. I have, I can tell you that at the Hannah School, Ms. Montevecchi declared that in all of the days that we've been in school, there's only been 2 days when they've had their snack break inside versus outside. So I can assure you that the Hannah School will be eating outside. Wear your jackets, because they always do. Raincoats, too. They go out in the rain. I think the plan is largely to continue to utilize the outside learning spaces, so.
So they're.
But they have the space, they would have the space available if they needed to. Cafeterias, gyms, art room.
So they've been displaying hardiness in a way they haven't
They
had
are
to
very
in past
hardy at
years.
the Hannah School,
And
at all of our schools.
And are they doing so in their classroom cohort, or by grade, or how are they handling?
Well, so
that?
there was a lot of discussion today about what they would do, whether they would have, what that lunch period would look like. They all, at almost every school, every class has a designated outdoor learning space to them. So they, I think, in determining, it would be a matter of coverage and how they would be utilizing lunch. So I don't have the specific details. I do usually, rely on the building level leaders
Right.
when they're looking at the specifics. So, I mean.
We're actually trying to run a meeting, and the elementary principals were already off huddled.
Yeah, making their plan.
Several versions going.
So I guess I just wanted to, I think I want to just make a minute. I mean, when I said 11 hours, I didn't mean that it was thrown together and that this was a haphazard decision that we made. We've been thinking and planning about this for a long time. I think what I would like you all to know, we're prepared to act however you want us to, but we're prepared to open at the timeline that I told you in terms of whether or not we would be resourced and ready to go. So I sometimes get nervous at my choice of words, because just like Miss Oliver's got kind of returned back, she did not just say the only reason we are opening is because the surrounding communities are opening. This has been something that, as an administrative team, we have been talking about since June of last year. What would it look like? We have provisions made for returning for in-person, provisions for hybrid, provisions for remote. So I don't want it to seem as if we haven't been planning and that we haven't been thinking in advance about what this would look like. And so I apologize for my word choice around the 11 hours, because that's not what I meant. But what I meant were the finite details about individually whether 15 minutes inside and 15 minutes outside had not quite been worked out. So
Is it? Thank you. Is it fair to say that at the elementary level, the ability to plan for and act on the lunch is fairly well fleshed out?
I think it would be fair to say that the ability to act on and implement lunch, I have confidence that it would be done with the ability that it needs to. The buildings are in, the teams, and we've been working quite hard. We're very comfortable, the same number of children, so they're aware and understand what spaces they would need and how they would do it, and they've probably already done a similar mock through with what they do with snack break, I guess. So I guess, yeah, if that's the answer is yes. It's pretty well easily laid out. Whether they'd make some changes or adjustments just because they found a better way to do it, I'm not sure. But they are very comfortable in what they do and how they operate at the elementary. They've been doing it throughout, and really the guidance doesn't change much of anything except for that they would have a longer day. The biggest challenge at the elementary school is that we have repurposed some of our specialists as classroom teachers. So staffing-wise, we need to make some adjustments as to how we provide the preps to teachers in a longer day. That really, if we have an obstacle at the elementary, it's a staffing obstacle, and we already have addressed how we would take a look and what we would do to kind of overcome that. But I don't think lunch was as big an obstacle as the other pieces at elementary.
Dr. Trochek, the elementary principal is saying the plan is
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, I just want
And-
to, oh, go ahead.
I'll wait.
Okay, I was just going to say, as a point of order, Ms. Bisnick did ask the chair what the process would be to suspend further consideration of something that's actively on the table, and it would be to make a motion to lay it on the table or to table the motion. It would need a second. It is not debatable, but it must pass by a 2/3 vote. So for our body, it would be a 5. Okay. So Mayor Cahill wants to finish, and then Mr. Mulady.
So, Dr. Trocek, if we were, and of course with the elementary, we're talking about March 29th, and they would need to be in compliance by April 5th anyway. And it sounds like there's a lot to be confident about in the elementary school's ability to implement the lunch period, from my point of view. If we were to not have if we were to have the middle school kids come in 5 days a week, but not yet stay for a full day because of concerns about, the ability to do lunch the way we'd all want. How might that work with the transportation piece?
So that would not be a transportation issue. I will say, ironically, and as I said, we didn't begin doing this. We actually had met with the middle school staff on Tuesday, and at the time, that was prior to the commissioners coming out with this timeline. We were making a proposal to come back in the same hours that we're in, 5 days a week. It was met with some concern, not because of the concerns that were raised were, why would you ask us to change schedules twice? Why do we either just want to go to what we're going, but we would, as teachers, there were teachers who raised concerns, significant number of teachers who raised concerns at the meeting that by asking them to convert to 5 days a week and then to convert to a full day, why would we ask them to make they were objecting to a transition like that, in that they felt that it was going to cause them a challenge in planning and the number of transitioning twice. So, again, it's a possibility. We have a schedule that we mocked up, that we looked at, that we could do. That's certainly something we could do if there's an appetite for that. I think in listening, we always, as I said, we sort of bring schedules forward. We listen to feedback, and as Lisa alluded to earlier, that was what she was talking about. We went forward with a modified schedule that did not include lunch. The feedback was that there was a challenge. I think we need to get lights back there. That there would be a challenge, that it would be more challenging for teachers to make 2 adjustments for a 3-week period of time. That was just some minute, and again,
Okay.
as I said, we're here to kind of be as flexible as we can and listen and provide any opportunities that you have. I feel like in Beverly, we have a team, administrative and teacher team, that can do whatever we ask them to do and will do whatever we ask them to do. I think for us, we share some of the concerns for students and for the lack of, we know that there are a number of students who are not engaging in remote learning. We know that there are a number of students who are struggling on the days when they're not in school, and we know that when they're in school, we get a different outcome for them. So for me and for the administrative leadership team, I think we're sort of leading with, we're concerned about students who are not in, so.
Mr. Mulady. And
So
then
if I could just wrap, the reason I'm asking is, I want the kids in every day. I think they desperately need for us to get them in every day. I'm not hell-bent on them having lunch. So, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
and
I
that's,
understand.
If that's something that makes more sense to
I mean, something that we
to you
certainly-
folks as colleagues, I mean, we can look at that amendment. I know some of you, that may make this much more palatable. At any rate. Oh, I never intend to pun. I'm not that quick.
So, Mr. Mulady and then Ms. Bisnick.
Don't downplay the Middlebury education, Mr. Mayor. You can definitely master a pun. So I want to say, Ms. Oliver, Dr. Trocek, thank you so much. Like, this isn't a gotcha game, so I appreciate, your mindfulness and your word choices, but one of the benefits that, we have in this position is people aren't going to say, well, you said at this meeting, like, that was going to be it. So I just want to say, thank you very much, and it's got to be very stressful to choose your words carefully. As you can tell, I don't often do that. So I did so I did calm down a little bit, and some of the things that are making me feel better is just a reminder to the body and to the public that students who signed up to go to the schools under the model that we voted on have the ability to go back to have the ability to go into RLA if they need to.
Parents have a choice. They will be issued, well, if we don't do anything tonight, I probably will wait and issue it later. I'm sorry. We will be surveying parents, whether we were planning on doing it tomorrow, but I think it will depend on based upon whatever decision is made tonight. Parents will will be asked to make a decision to be in person or to be remote. Whatever decision they make will remain through the end of the year. So, and that no matter what model they're in, they can make that decision. They can choose to be remote and come back in. They can be in person and choose to go remote. We need that information sooner rather than later, but people need to know what they're opting into or not. And it's going to, one of the caveats that I would like to say on that is changes like this may cause changes either in classroom locations, student-teacher assignments. Not that we're trying to do that, but people should be mindful that, when we make a mass change of enrollment and model, we're going to be impacting some staffing issues and some questions. So
Okay.
I just want people to know that.
So if people are still playing at home in these unprecedented times, we need to pivot if we need to. But I know that if this team went to their staff and said, this is what the deal is, there would be a plan that would be made with a lot of thought and a lot of consideration. However, I feel like this is just another good argument to extend the time to allow those conversations to happen between, couples and their kids about what the plan's going to look like, to get the voting, to get the information from polling our families, but also allow, teachers to make adjustments as well. And then, very importantly, people to get another shot in the arm or have an opportunity to get a shot in the arm. So I'm very convinced that we've made it very clear that, these conversations often produce, a compromise, and it's not something that everyone can agree upon. The mayor has expressed, one of his concerns. I expressed my concern about if we can have our kids come back in at the latest possible date that we're allowed to by the state. And then just while I still have the green light on the mic, I would not be voting to table this for conversation. I think if we can make a decision tonight about this, I think it's in everybody's best interest. But I appreciate the effort about it. Thank you.
Ms. Visnick.
I have two things. One is that relative to the having to decide all in or all out, I appreciate, and I think I said this last week, I appreciate the fact that when we bring more children in, if a family feels uncomfortable with that, they can do their own pivoting and then stream entirely from home. However, I would like to, on another evening, have a conversation about, especially for children in AP classes or science classes that involve, what is it called, dissection, that maybe we make an exception to that very hard rule and we say, guess what, you can come in for that hands-on class. Maybe for, I don't know, there's probably other examples, but I think that for some families, that is going to be a horrible decision to have to make, and that for us to do what's best for them academically, maybe we want to make some classifications of exceptions, especially for our AP students. So you say, okay, 3 of your 4 classes you're going to stream, but if you want to come in for your AP class, especially if you're a senior, you can come in for that one class, and that way you're limiting your exposure. I would like to have that conversation on a future night. If we could put that on the agenda, please, Madam President. But my direct question for our K-4 students, we talked earlier about the fact that we are doing diagnostic testing. We do some amount of testing now of where we think our children are, right? And we do differentiated instruction. So I would like to know, it's a 2-part question. One, if we extend the day, how much of that day is actually going to be for our K-4s? How much of that additional time is going to be time on learning? Because I believe it's going to be lunch and the specials. And so if we're not really getting any more time, so the first part of the question is, will that extra 2-hour extension give us any more actual time on learning in our base subjects? And the second part of the question is, how are our scores for our students in our elementary schools looking now on that testing that we're doing now and the measuring that we're doing?
So in terms of structured learning time, art, music, STEM, PE, you count as structured? Every time. Sorry about that. In terms of structured learning time, art, music, PE, STEM, those are all considered time that would be structured learning times. Our lunch would be an additional 30 minutes that would not count. 30 minutes is the lunch and the recess. Some buildings, it might be a little even more than that because there would be probably another. So of the 2 hours that we're adding, I would say 30 to 45 minutes would not be considered structured learning time, but the rest of it would be considered structured learning time. So that's the simple answer. And then in terms of data, our data looks really good. Our elementary data at mid-year, I think, parallels the same as it does every year. We have done a tremendous job in the model that we're in. I do believe that the data for some of our RLA may lag a little behind, but that's something that we believe we're keeping our eye on. Is that true? In the early grades, so in the early literacy grades, the data for RLA classes was a little lower than it was for the in-person classes. But the in-person classes that we have, I believe that the principals would tell you that for students that are attending regularly in person, the data is very strong.
So we don't have so that would suggest that we don't have a compelling reason to extend our day.
Except for the state law and regulations that are going to require that we do. That's the compelling reason that I have.
Again, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I can make, there is a, let me go backwards. I think that there's not any of us who would not argue that the model that we put together in elementary was second to none. And the work that has been done around that has allowed this entire elementary age group students, preschool through, I would venture to say, Bethany, preschool through grades 4, the model that we had where they were in and they were attending, we don't have significant learning loss for all students. That being said, there are students whose engagement or attendance has been low. We've been tracking and trying to get them in. That number is higher than it normally would be when we aren't in a pandemic for lots of reasons. However, I'm presenting to you plans in response to the regulations that the Department of Ed is sending down to me and making sure that you all know what we need to do to be in compliance with what's being said.
And can you say explicitly that if we're not in compliance, what happens?
I don't know. I never try to live in the edge of not in compliance, so I don't really, I wouldn't know what
Come on over, it's a lot of fun.
I don't know what the answer would be. And I guess, I don't know.
Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Madam President. I appreciate the conversation, and I understand the questioning. I do want to say, though, that to me, and I remember I was a first-term state representative when we passed ed reform, and I offered all these amendments to say, cut this out with English language arts and math and nothing else mattering, right? So to me, STEM, phys ed, health, art, music, they're all really important. They always will be. And the additional time in person and together is, I think, is of great value. So I understand, the thinking about, what is the state demanding and what is it getting us? But I think all of that is to the kids, to the kids' lifelong benefit would be my sense. So.
It will also be some of their work for in Lexia and ST Math, which is their intervention pieces. So there will be some core curriculum time too.
Dr. Flair was just saying some of the time back in would involve core curriculums as well.
Calling myself, I'm always optimistic this time of year that we've had our winters. I think that the work that the elementary schools have done with their outdoor classrooms and incorporating so many elements, I actually am quite excited to see what the elementaries will be able to do with more time together. And I will hope that we don't have any April Fool's Day snowstorms that have.
Oh, you've got it.
Where's our meteorologist that we had at the high school, AJ? I really think that, in New England, we can look forward to some opportunities where the kids will have those authentic experiences outdoors. I saw Mr. Malady's hand and then Ms. Bisnick.
I just want to say, like, I would be curious if you knew what would happen if we were in compliance. There must have been a double life if you knew the answer to that question. To steal, something that my wife does for a living, if she goes to help out a lab, get their license, the regulatory license, and if they're not in compliance, the lab would get shut down. So I just can't imagine the financial and other sort of repercussions if we're not in compliance with the state law. So that's going to be part of my guiding factor in the decision making tonight.
Ms. Bisnick?
So I believe we don't get a whole lot of money from the state per student. And I believe that the lack of compliance, and I was hoping Dr. Chirocek would know this answer, but the amount of research that I was able to do from last night until this evening is that we would lose state funding for every day, every student, every day that we didn't meet time on learning. And so if you basically take how much money we get per student and you divide by how many days, and then you multiply by how many days we might not be in, you get a number. And so I have a back of the napkin, back of the envelope, whatever is this term. I have a number in my head, but I won't speculate on that. But like I said, if that's, I am brave, John, and I think that we can think outside the box, and we should. And if our test scores, for instance, for our K to 4s are good, and I'm not discounting STEM and the arts. Those specials happen, and they happen right now, and they're happening in a way that is quote unquote working. And our core education in K to 4 is also working. And, given the fear around eating and we go back to data, it's not just fear. I can hear everybody jumping on my words about that. There's data that shows that people who eat in restaurants have a much higher chance of contracting the virus. And so it goes back to safety and what is the most safe thing to do. And I think that we, especially our K to 4s, because we've been in school all year long, we have done incredibly well by them. And Dr. Chirocek just said that the test scores show that. So, I think that we need to give serious consideration to whether we want to do that. And I am all for bringing our middle schoolers back more days of the week as well, but maybe also not with lunch. And so from a compliance point of view, if it comes down to money, then we really need to have the where are your values relative to money? And earlier today, we voted on our values, and we said our values are that we don't want to make our children sit and do MCAS. And if are you going to put a monetary value on the risk of someone contracting the virus because we're sitting without our masks on, eating together? I think that I would like to make an amendment and say that I don't want to bring our elementaries back until April 5th, the date that the state says we have to do it. And I wish to disaggregate our middle school conversation from the elementary conversation and decide on that at a later date and time.
So Ms. Bisnick is making a motion to amend the current motion on the table, which would be to change the March 29th to April 5th for elementary, and to remove from the table the middle school date. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
There's a motion on the table with a second from Mr. Malady to amend the present motion, changing the elementary to the April 5th date, and to remove the middle school conversation from this item. Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. So with regards to this proposed amendment, just obviously any one of us just speak for ourselves as we try to sort through this together. I have a great comfort level with everything that's going on at our elementary schools and with our elementary schools' ability to implement lunch safely and with the added benefits that will come with the longer day. as for the middle school, yeah, these kids need to be in school more. And to put that off and not make that decision tonight so that people can get prepared for it, I can't support that. I had said before that given that it's a larger school and there are, some complexities to the lunch component, and the fact that we technically can wait a little longer on that, but we can get them back in 5 days a week, starting very soon, based on the original motion. I think we should stick with what's in the original motion, and if this proposed amendment does fail, happy to join with somebody in putting a separate one up that will say, let's do the middle school 5 days a week, but don't do the lunch quite yet.
I have a clarifying question, if I might. I actually had it just before this, but your amendment makes it even more important, and I think it would be for Dr. Trocheck or maybe Dr. Flaherty. For the Wednesday release at 1 p.m., would that require a waiver, or we meet our time on learning, and so it would just provide a natural schedule? Would we be qualified to have a waiver or an exception if we wanted to release the middle school at 1 o'clock all 5 days a week and have maybe some?
According to the guidance, that wouldn't really qualify us to apply for a waiver. We always can apply for a waiver, but if we were to apply for a waiver under the idea that we would have to prove that with 3-foot distancing, we don't have the facilities to be able to have the students in the building. And so that we don't have the facilities to offer them lunch, and we don't have the facilities to offer them 3-foot distancing in their classrooms. So they would, at least according to the guidance that we got today, they will be sending someone out from the department. They will tour the building. They'll look at the parent survey results to see, does the parents also concur that students we don't need to come to school. And then the consultant would advise us as to how to make adjustments so that we could get to that full in-person. That's what the guidance says today. We do qualify to apply for a waiver, which we will have to do if the middle school doesn't begin on April 5th, because our 5th graders, the law says K through 5 needs to be in school by April 5th, and our 5th graders, but we would be eligible for and would likely receive a waiver for our 5th grade to not attend. That one, I think, would be not a difficult one to get. And to push, in other words, pushing 5th grade off to the 28th with the rest of the middle school.
Thank you for providing that. I think that provides a lot more insight to my decision, so thank you. Ms. Robinson?
Thank you, Madam President. I think I've received quite a few concerns from parents regarding the idea of having five days with a dismissal at 1 o'clock, because just of the logistics of an older child having to come back, that was a lot of concern from parents. And I'm also, when thinking about changing the schedule twice, the children need consistency more than anything right now. And I think that would be detrimental to change the schedule 2 times. Whatever we end up doing, I think we need to do it once and make it robust and make it that as an administrator, I'm just imagining that's going to cause a lot of stress to change the schedule twice in a month to something that you'll never use again.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend on the table presently, and that is to change the primary motion for elementary to return to full day on April 5th, which is the day set by DESE, and to remove middle school from the table. So this is not a vote on the primary motion, but rather to amend the primary motion. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Looks like we are. Those in favor of amending the primary motion? three. Those opposed to amending? That's 4. Okay, so that amendment has not passed. Was I hearing that there might be additional amendments to the primary motion, or are we at a point that we want to vote on the primary motion? Mr. Milady?
I would defer to if the mayor and Ms. Visnick can possibly come up with a motion, because we seem to be on two important sides on this, so I'd like to see if we can maybe brainstorm together. I have to put anyone on the spot, I'm sorry.
Happy to try. I offer an amendment to change the middle school model to 5 days in, beginning, where were we at, April 5th? Is that what's on the, what was already there? 5 days in, beginning April 5th. School day ending at 1, no lunch.
Is there anyone with a second?
So you got my calendar, I'm sorry.
So,
It would be helpful to be watching where we had the calendar up before.
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
It's a little hard to visualize.
Was that the slide that we used to make the initial motion?
Yes, just to see when.
With all the levels? Yeah. That one?
So I have, this is what was proposed initially. This was the initial.
I know you are.
So the mayor is proposing to amend the primary motion by having the return, rather than regularly scheduled hours, but to have a 1 p.m. release. We would need a second to that amended motion to enter into discussion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay? Ms.
Can we
Coelho?
amend the amendment further?
We need a date.
You were going to say the same thing? After you, please.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend, and we have some discussion.
Yeah, I suppose it's discussion. I'm wondering if there's not a way to marry the two and have April 5th be the return for elementary and the partial day for middle school happen on April 5th, whether that's logistically inconceivable or if that's something we can talk about.
If I could, Madam, well, Dr. Trocher should really answer. I think I know what she's going to say. Right, but doesn't it make the transportation ramp back up not work for that week,
Mike?
that 1 week?
So I will, the reason for pushing elementary to the 29th in part was that it was less of a shift and change they were going to have to make anyway. It's a 4-day week from March 29th to, there's no school on April 2nd, it's Good Friday. So we thought that pushing it up, and it allows me to implement the bus schedule starting at 11:50 at the high school to do increased transportation for the high school students that are beginning in on the 2/3 model. That was the reason, part of the reason. So moving it to April 5th just means that we would have to implement at the high school the 12:20 and find the space for the students to wait in the buses, or not start the buses until April 5th at the high school, and have the 2/3 model on the 4 days of the week before have to find their rides, and something that we can work out. It just makes it a little more messy. The going to the 8 to 1, 8:30 to 1 schedule. I mean, it's doable, it's different, and I know that, so remember, the middle school model right now, it's a big change for them because they're in 2 days a week with Wednesdays remote. So it's a big schedule change for them to go from the 2-day hybrid model they're in now to the 5-day modified schedule, 8 to 1, to the 5-day full day schedule. It just seems that, so that was the reasoning behind it, and that's the reason why we didn't come forward. We had actually originally started there with the hope that we were going to be able to stay 8 to 1, because we also would prefer to do that, but when the guidance came out and we knew there was a deadline of April 28th, that's when we shifted from proposing the 8 to 1 to just proposing full in. So did that answer your question about the logistics?
It did. It made me think about if there are additional funds, I feel like spending that on figuring out transportation or somehow.
So it's not a
doing
money
that. Is
thing,
that a-
though? The problem isn't a money thing. Because we run our own transportation here, we have a 3-tiered system for transportation runs, and so all of the buses are required to transport elementary school. All of the buses are required to transport the middle school, and we actually just haven't been running the high school runs, but we utilize the same buses and the same bus drivers. So it's not that we don't have the money, we don't have the buses, and it's not like we have a contract and we can just ask, one of the bus companies to send more buses. So it was a logistical thing, as it would actually cost more money. We're going to be spending a little more money in transportation no matter what we do, but we actually have the funding. Funding isn't an issue. It's the logistics of the buses and the drivers.
So I'm going to call Ms. Coelho, and then I'm going to call myself because I have a question as well.
So I know some people were talking about like the 2 different phases for the middle school. Like if we did just jump in on April 5th and say, okay, we go with Ms. Visnick's plan, having them go 5 days but half days instead of 5 days full days, it at least gives them an adjustment from going just 2 days.
Yep.
And it eases them in
Yep.
with the 5 half days versus 5 full days. And some of them might be uncomfortable with eating lunch, but instead of just ripping the Band-Aid off real quick, just let them.
That was our
ease
original
into it.
thinking. That was our original thinking when we proposed it. I'm just saying the feedback that we got ran contrary to that. And so, again, not something that we can't do. Certainly we can do it. It is a significant schedule change to go to the half day and then another significant schedule change. Just, it is what it is. That's,
That's all this, that was from the survey from the parents, though.
No, this was, so it wasn't wasn't a scientific research-based survey. It was, we were on a Google Meet and we displayed the schedule like we do. And the feedback from quite a few teachers was, why would we have to do this twice? Now, whether or not they're thinking, let's just wait till the 28th, or whether they were thinking, let's do it on the 5th, I'm not going to speak to that, but there were some questions around, and the pieces that were brought up were the planning. So when you plan your lessons for this, and then you have a new set of, a new length of time and a new number of days that you're seeing students, and so you have to change the way you're lesson planning again, and then you change that. So it's just asking for a lot of pivots. And for students, well, actually for kids, I think they just show up and sit there, and because we rotate, it's a little less confusing.
So I guess my question/comment, and I think I initially was like, if we can avoid lunch, that's great, but understanding the complicated 7th, 8th grade schedule, having a 7th and 8th grader, I don't see how letting them go at 1 will get them their actual course time that is scheduled, because of the 6 or 7 teachers that each of them have. And so to the point that the teachers made about why would you change the schedule twice, it's too complicated. It's been very complicated all year. I also see just one other observation is that we have our April vacation. And I think that, with the shortened week and the vacation, we can make adjustments, we can make tweaks during that time. I think the primary motion is where I think like the most simplicity and the most practical solution lies. And so I appreciate this amendment looking for ways to compromise, but I just don't think the shortened middle school day is quite the right approach, given what I'm hearing at the table. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'd just like to ask Ms. Oliver and Dr. Trocheck, would you think it would be in the best interest of student achievement and teacher resources to have the students in at the 1 o'clock dismissal, till the 1 o'clock dismissal? Do you think that would be in the best interest? And could you speak to what you think would be in the best interest of students for a dismissal time?
For the 2-week period or for the whole year? So the April 5th to the April vacation is 2 weeks, the week of April 5th and the week of April 12th. when we return from vacation, the commissioner's guidance says that on the 28th, which is a Wednesday. So I will speak for myself personally. Originally, we thought a transition with a half-day schedule would be better. I think I actually understand the complications that it causes to shift for the administrator just to have to make 4 new schedules for each time, and for teachers to learn their way through the new schedules. It really does complicate things a little. In addition to figuring out, are we going to then go home, and is there a remote schedule that we're implementing in the afternoon, and what does the remote schedule in the afternoon look like for the 2-week period that we would pivot? I guess I will say that we withdrew the idea about the transition to the half-day because we understood and heard from the teachers and people who were working to try to put it together. And therefore, we just went straight to this. So whether or not it's April 5th or April 28th, I will say, I had said it before, I have concerns about kids not being in school and heading off into 2 weeks of no school and then an April vacation week of no school. There are 4 days of school that will take place for students at the middle school between April 5th and April 26th. And there would be 10 days of school that would take place for students between April 5th and April 26th. So that's where I lie in terms of why I think there's merit to this. I'm not discounting any of the things that anybody pointed out. I understand there hasn't been a lot of fairness in the pandemic in general, and none of us wish this upon ourselves. A national health emergency brings to the table all of these complications, and unfortunately, I think, we're thrown into a position where we have very difficult decisions to make. And honestly, I will tell you all, I don't believe there's a wrong decision that can be made. Whatever decision gets made, we will go back to school and we will put a smile on our faces and we'll implement it and we'll welcome students in whatever way that you ask us to. So I guess that's just sort of, in general, what I think. I mean, it always feels monumental, and yet in the end, we just really want to do what's best for kids. And we want to make schools work and work together to do the best we can.
Thank you. I think Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have to say, boy, we've been working hard at this a long time. I just want to say, I have utmost respect for everybody's thinking. I really do. And while I would love to get us to a place where we had a 7-0 vote on something, I've been racking my brains all night trying to figure out how to get to 4, because you've heard me say it, I'm desperate to get these kids in every day. They're getting 4 hours twice a week, so that they're not truly half days, they're kind of like 2/3 days, right? Mm-hmm. They're getting 4 hours twice a week. If we can get them in 5 days a week, we're going to increase by 150% the amount of time that they're in school. That's even, that's even without having lunch and going to the full day. I put the amendment on the table because I was hoping that would somehow get us to 4 or 5. I don't know what to do. I'm happy to withdraw the amendment. I'm happy to vote for the amendment. Again, every bit of respect for all the thinking we're trying to go through, and all the conviction and compassion and concern that's coming our way from so many people who all have these kids' best interests at heart. So, anyway.
I saw Ms. Visnick's hand next.
I wish to acknowledge that more than one transition is quite a burden on the administrators, on the teachers, on the children, and on the families. And because of that, I, and like you, Mr. Mayor, over here contorting myself, trying to move to find a place that we can be happy. So I wonder if there is an appetite in the group for our K-4 on April 5th, which I believe is what the current, I can't even keep track of where our motions are right now. Start our K-4 on April 5th and bring our 5 to 8s back full-time, 5 days a week after April vacation.
Okay, so our motion on the table was for just the middle school to start April 5 at 1 p.m. And Dr. McKenzie wondered, but we didn't amend the amendment for the April 5. So I think we're still at the primary motion of elementary on the 29th. But what you're suggesting is a wonder or an amendment?
I was wondering if there was an appetite for that compromise. If I see any heads nodding, I will, well, I don't even know that I can make a amendment right now because there's already an amendment
Yeah,
out
so
that we haven't voted
we'll
on.
have to vote on the amendment, but I think the mayor had also suggested he might withdraw his.
Well, I can't withdraw the amendment for that. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about the middle school kids not getting anything additional until after April vacation. I mean, again, I understand the thinking. I don't feel I need to repeat myself because I just said it.
Dr.
That's
Trocheck,
what I
can you
said.
please put back up the slide that says when the max vaccination sites will be active? So I'm, again, we have constituents who are educators, and we are the employer of record of our educators. And given that potentially somebody doesn't even get their first shot until March 27th, I'm having a real hard time. Our K to 4s have already been in all 5 days of the week, and God bless them for doing that. I don't really want to have them have lunch. But I'm willing to back off my wild idea. Actually, I'm going to still secretly harbor it, that we buck the state and we don't do lunch. But I'm willing to compromise on that and say, okay, K to 4 will go on April 5th. Like they said, we have to go. But to turn around and do such a drastic change here in this building, without giving those teachers any acknowledgement of or any chance, a real fighting Hunger Games kind of chance at a vaccination, just seems incredibly harsh. We did it last week. I made a plea to this body last week, and clearly my plea wasn't convincing enough. But we heard some teachers again tonight. And the fact of the matter is there's an incredible dichotomy and there's not a lot of people in the middle. And so I, again, will thank this body for trying to compromise. I don't think that I left here last week expecting that we would say, oh yeah, and in another 2 weeks, we'll have all 1,400 and then all of the elementaries in as well, all full up, full time, full day, eating lunch. So again, in one night's time, we don't have to decide this tonight yet, and we're trying to decide in one night's time a huge change to our district, which is why an hour ago I said maybe we should table this and come back next Wednesday night, right? We still have at least 2 weeks' time before people would have to plan for the change. And short of that, I'm also offering up amendments, compromises that I think might float.
So we have an amendment on the table to change the middle school to a 1 p.m. release. I think we should move that question, unless Mr. Milady, I saw your hand just as I started to speak.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to echo Ms. Visnick's statement. I expressed privately to a couple members and to Dr. Trocheck that one of my biggest concerns is about lunch, but it seems that that's out of my hands, out of our hands. So I feel like there is some compromise that we're taking place, and I appreciate the body as we continue to move forward.
So the chair would like to move the question on the amendment, which is to the primary motion to have a 1 p.m. release for middle school students. All those in favor of changing the primary motion to a 1 p.m. release for the middle school? It's 4, and those opposed? Are you abstaining, Ms. Visnick?
I am abstaining, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the amendment has passed, so the vote would be on the primary now that the middle school would have a 1 p.m. release.
May I say something?
Sure.
I should have spoken up earlier. I'm going to take a risk here and put this out here, and I know it's already passed. I feel compelled to speak for the teachers, that we're asking them to make these two moves. And I heard from them loud and clear that that was going to be a real challenge. And so I just want to put that out there because I want to acknowledge what we're asking them to do with the understanding that kids come first. But if our teachers are in such a way that they can't function well, then they're not good for kids. And I feel really strongly about that. I also feel strongly that kids should be back in school. So I do feel it's very complicated, but I just feel the need to speak for my staff and to say that what we're asking them to do is much more difficult than what it sounds. And so I just needed to put that out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Dr. McKenzie?
Thank you for that. I just want to make a quick comment. Having sat through master schedule changes and knowing how you can literally just lose your entire lunch trying to do that all day. I think the challenge for me is that I'm thinking about if I'm a teacher or an administrator in a building waiting to get a vaccine and I'm wanting students to come back, it's really hard to think about saying that, the alternative is that we just go for a full day and have lunch for me. Like, it's hard to see how to do that right away. And so I'm not deciding that, not realizing like it's incredibly difficult to make those sort of pivots like that. But I'm also really worried about our educators having time to get vaccines. And they're equally worrying to me. And I think if I were to have to decide between more time for vaccines and more times to really think through lunch's logistics, with the difficulty with the schedule, I think I sleep better at night feeling like people are less exposed. And it's an incredibly hard decision, and I can't wait to bring you all flowers at the end of the year and just thank you for this. But I'm really just concerned about maximizing times to get vaccine, maximizing times to think about lunch being done, and the weather improving again for the likelihood of that to be as outdoors and safe as possible.
What's the current motion?
Okay. Dun, dun, dun. The current motion on the table is to have the elementary return to full day on March 29th and the middle school to return 5 days on April 5th with a release at 1 p.m.
And Ms. Oliver, I apologize, but can you please maybe say more directly what you feel compelled to speak about the teachers, that they don't want to change their schedule twice?
That is correct. I feel like the feedback that I received from them was they feel like they're, to make a change and to do it well, and then to have break, and then to make another change and do it well. They want to do well by kids. And so to make multiple changes in a short period of time in a year that they have worked so hard, has it been perfect? No. But have they put 100% into what they're doing? Yes. And so I just think that what I'm hearing from them is that it is a challenge to do the double change. With that being said, to offer a solution, if it's still viable, is to think about perhaps giving us another week that we could figure out more logistics around lunch so that we could bring kids back and perhaps make the lunches even smaller so that people feel more safe. We could get more kids outside. It's an option.
Ms. Visnick?
I would like to try to make an amendment. I've opened a calendar on my screen so that I can try to, I'm quite a visual learner personally. I would like to push our K to 4 to April 5th, and I would like our 5 to 8 to be the 12th, the week before school vacation, all day, full day. We'll have a week of all in. That gives everybody an extra week or 2 weeks for our middle schoolers to have a chance of getting vaccinated. That gives them extra weeks to plan how to make their lunches as small as possible. It relieves the double transition that Ms. Oliver just spoke to. By pushing K to 4 back another week, it also gives those educators another week to hopefully get vaccinated.
I will second that motion. Do we have any discussion about Ms. Biznick's amendment? The amendment would be to change the date for K to 4 to April 5th at a full day, and for 5 to 8, April 12th at a full day, to minimize the schedule changes and to provide more time for educators to seek vaccinations, and what was the other, and the lunch, and to figure out, to make the lunches smaller. Is that essentially your motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that clear? So this would be an amendment to the primary motion. So we're discussing the amendment at this time. If there's no discussion, we can vote. Sorry, Mr. Malay.
I just want to say thank you very much for everybody who really, we're expressing our vulnerability. We're trying to get a compromise. And Ms. Oliver, thank you very much. That was very brave. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the amendment? Dr. McKenzie?
I recall that we revisited the April 5th date and there was the transportation issue. Will there be enough time to sort that out for the high schoolers if we were to make that?
It will just mean that we'll have to find a way for that week to cover the 40 minutes while they wait for the bus. And I'll go supervise them while they wait for the bus, so that'll work. No, we'll figure it out. Any volunteers for bus supervision between 11:50 and Mrs. Taylor would love to see you in there to help out with that.
Okay, if we don't have any
Not
more
till the 5th.
questions or discussions on the amendment that Ms. Biznick has put forward, it would be to amend the primary motion to have elementary students start full in April 5th, which is required by DESE. Have the 5 to 8 start on April 12th, also in the full day model, to allow for educators more time to get vaccinations and for lunch to be thought through for, and hopefully better weather, right? More outdoor space. Okay. Everyone clear on what the amendment is? So this would be a vote on the amendment. All those in favor? We have 6. And Mayor, are you opposed? Okay. The amendment has passed, so the primary motion now is to have our elementary students return April 5th to the full day model and the 5 to 8 return on April 12th to the full day model. Is there any more discussion? No more discussion. So we're taking a vote on our main motion. The main motion, again, is for our K to 4 to begin full day 5 days a week on April 5th and 5 to 8 to return on April 12th to full day, with the Wednesday exception of a 1 p.m. release. Was that your
The 12 noon release for elementary and a 1 p.m. on Wednesdays.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. That's part of the primary motion. So Wednesdays would be an earlier release day. Okay. All those in favor? I'm counting 6. And opposed? Are you?
May I please vote yes?
All those in favor?
No.
I'm still counting 6. Okay.
Yes, I know.
Okay. And opposed?
Last call, guys.
Okay.
So I have one other, because of the vote that you just took, I'm going to ask that you vote that on a waiver, I have to submit to the Department of Ed a waiver for our 5th graders to not begin on April 5th. So I will put the waiver together and submit it to the Department of Ed. I don't anticipate it being a problem, but they did say that it should have a school committee vote on the content of the waiver. So the waiver will read that I'm postponing the beginning of 5th grade to align with the middle school, and they will begin on April 12th.
Okay, so I heard Ms. Biznick make the motion and Mayor Cahill make the second to have the superintendent apply for a waiver on behalf of our 5th graders who will be starting a week after the April 5th deadline for April 12th. Okay. Any questions? All those in favor? There we go, 7-0.
Do we have to vote on accepting money, or can we push that off by a week or two?
How much money? The transfers have already occurred. Can we just do it very, very, very quickly? And we will table our policy discussion. I actually wonder, do we want a committee of the whole next week, or we're satisfied with the 24th? We can pick up some of the things we left off. 24th, okay, good. Ms. Biznick, really quickly, you don't have to give the full report, but let's bring forward the transfer.
The Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities recommends the approval of the attached budget transfer number 197.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. This is to align all the salaries and everything with our collective bargaining, okay? All those in favor? 7-0, okay?
Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities recommends the approval of the following gifts to schools: $1,204.14 from Life Touch Photography to go to BHS, and district-wide an amount of $75 from Loiter's Environmental General Gift for a total of $1,279.14.
So moved. Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Robinson.
Who would ever say no to free
All those
money?
in favor? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All
Is
those
it
in favor?
debatable?
It is not
It's not
debatable.
10:57. We'll pick up everything else on the 24th. Thank you, as always, BevCam.
Do you want this unplugged? Do we unplug this?
Yes,
15,
yes.
I know, we're